You're listening to the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Jeff Brantley.
What's up, everybody? Episode 92 of the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast coming your way in just a few minutes here. Jeff Brantley, glad to be back with you today on a Friday edition, Thursday edition, I'm going backwards nowadays, Saturday edition, Sunday edition, whenever you're listening to this episode coming up later this weekend. Glad to be with you today to talk about all of what we have going on this weekend in the combat sports world. A lot to talk about, a lot to preview. MMA, it's back this weekend. We finally have some bigger fights. We have an LFA card actually Friday night, but even more importantly, we have a UFC Vegas 28 card on Saturday night, and then of course on Sunday night, which is a weird day to have any kind of combat sports. Normally on Sundays, maybe you'll get a Chael Sonnen submission underground. Maybe you'll get some grappling tournaments right. Maybe occasionally you'll get a combat sport, a fight here and there. Not normally though, but this weekend we do. We get I'll say big. It's a spectacle for sure. There's some other bigger fights. There's some other legitimate fights on the under part of this card, but we do have I'll call it a big card coming up Sunday night as well. Floyd Mayweather taking on Logan Paul. It's an exhibition. I'll put it in air quotes, exhibition. And I'll go over those rules in a second that came out the other day if you haven't seen them yet, which makes it an exhibition. But it's an exhibition nonetheless, whatever. It's a fight. At the end of the day, there's no headgear on these guys. It's 8 rounds, it's 3-minute rounds. It's going to be a fight coming up Sunday night. I'm going to preview that fight coming up later on in the show here on episode 92 of the Man in the Cage podcast, as well as I said, UFC Vegas 28, going to go through that card top to bottom. There's some good fights on that one. I have my guy John Stargaryen coming up in part 2 of the show today from the Club and Sub podcast. He's going to join me to talk about some of the betting angles for this card coming up Saturday night, as we do have the UFC back after a week off here and we move closer to UFC 263. So a ton to talk about. I'm really excited. I'm really pumped going into this show, and stick with me. Again, episode 92 coming your way in just a few minutes. First, the details of the show. You can follow me on Twitter now at Man in the Cage Pod. Same thing on Instagram, guys, at Man in the Cage Pod. Formerly at Jeff_Brantley. No, I'm not Prince. I'm not, I'm not an artist formerly known as Prince. I am still Jeff Brantley, but instead of at Jeff_Brantley on Twitter now, it is at Man in the Cage Pod and on Instagram. So go follow me there, guys. Also check out the website, maninthecagemmma.show. All the latest episodes, link to all of our videos up there, merchandise. If you want a Man in the Cage swag, podcast, t-shirt, sweatshirt, socks, any of that stuff, go to the website. All of that good stuff is up there. An about page if you're wondering why. This is the Man in the Cage podcast. There's a backstory to it, so go check it out. I'd love you to go check out the website, maninthecagemmma.show. Plus, there's also a link to my other betting podcast I have up there, my betting tips podcast, the Man in the Cage Sports Betting Show. There's a link to Patreon up there. And if you just want to help this show out here, if you love what I do every single week, which I love what I do, supporters allow me to do what I do, go hit the support the show button in the top right-hand corner of the screen. There's a button there. You can donate as little as $1 a month, all the way up to $10 a month. That'll go towards the show and allow me to keep doing what I'm doing. So I'm really appreciative of that. Go check that out, maninthecagemmma.show. The YouTube channel, if you don't know by now, I don't know, but if you don't, Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast YouTube channel. We're there on YouTube for live. I'll do some live videos. I'll also do, of course, the recorded episodes will go up there. Normally, there's a UFC simulation I'll do every single week. I'll do a UFC 4 simulation of the main event for every single UFC card. And I was going to do one again this week. I'm going to tweet it out as well, so you don't miss that I was going to do one. But the Man in the Cage team here, they came back to me. Now, I am a video game guy, but I do have some help behind the scenes again, okay? So the Man in the Cage team here, they came to me and they said, there's no Augusto Sakai in the video game. So there's going to be no simulation this week, unfortunately, but we'll get back on it next week, as I'm guessing, obviously, Marvin Vettori and Israel Adesanya are in the game. We'll get back to it next week, but no simulation this week. But normally, that's the kind of stuff we do up on the YouTube channel, so still go check it out. Hit the subscribe button. That way you get the latest notifications whenever a new video drops of the Man in the Cage podcast, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast on YouTube. And then if you're more in the old school of thought, I'm still that way sometimes. I'll be in the shower. I'll be running around doing errands. I got to go run some errands in a little bit here. I'll be listening to some podcasts. Check out the audio version of every podcast. That's up on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get them, guys, wherever you go to for your podcast. It's all there. Go hit the follow or the subscribe button, and then you get the latest notifications whenever a new episode drops right into your phone, laptop, whatever you use. I don't know. Is Elon Musk invented something else new now that we can, not that Elon Musk was, maybe Apple, I don't know. Whoever's out there, someone else invented a new technology yet? I don't know. Wherever you listen to your podcast, though, go check them out there, Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All right, let's get into it now. That's all the details surrounding the show. A lot to go over today. As I said, John Stargaryen coming up in part 2 of the show, and we're going to go extensively through UFC Vegas 28. So I am going to give my own preview here, especially the main event between Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Augusto Sakai in a second here for that UFC Vegas 28 main event. But I'm also going to make it maybe a little bit shorter than normal today, get to the Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul card, have some thoughts there as well, and then get into John Stargaryen, then we'll wrap it up, and we'll get out of here. And then I'll react coming up on Monday at episode 93. But UFC Vegas 28 coming up Saturday night, and we'll start there, guys. And this card is, and I said this, I'm going to say this coming up with John Stargaryen, that I actually recorded this interview yesterday with him, that originally, this is weeks ago, this is like a week or two ago, originally looking at all of the fighters that were dropping off of this card, looking at all of the fights we possibly could lose on UFC Vegas 28, it was starting to look like this is going to be a very bleak card. This is not going to be a very entertaining card. This is not going to be a card that can be sold very well to the casual fan, if you will. And that's where I always talk about on the show because, you know, I'm a diehard. A lot of you listening are a diehard. But at the end of the day, you have to expect that there are casual fans out there. I thought maybe that this card coming up on Saturday would not be sold very well to the casual fans. And maybe it still doesn't. I don't know. I mean, I don't know where the casual fan is on some of these fights. Now, you do get 2 heavyweight fights. I think that definitely boosts this card. But in my opinion, even if you are a casual fan, or of course, for diehards out there, this is a very good card still, though. It turned into a card, and I'm surprised about that there are a lot of intriguing matchups on this one that have a lot to do with, you know, future prospects of a lot of these fighters and who's going to be up, who's going to be down. There's even one on the main card where I think it could be a fight where loser leaves town a little bit, loser leaves the UFC. So there's some interesting, intriguing fights coming up Saturday night on UFC Vegas 28. And by the way, this is not a regular ESPN card. It's just an ESPN Plus card. I don't really mind. I mean, you still can stream it. I like the cards that are on ESPN too. I don't know why ESPN can't just throw these on like ESPN News or ESPNU if they don't want to put them on ESPN or ESPN2, even though it's still streaming online. Whatever. That's a topic for another show. Maybe I'll put that in my 5-minute topics coming up on Monday's show in episode 93. But we'll handle that, tackle that down the line. But let's get into UFC Vegas 28. As I said, previewing this card, my preview of the main event: Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Augusto Sakai. Both these guys come in with, I'll say, similar records, similar backgrounds here. Now, Rozenstrike does have a background, of course, in kickboxing. He does have a combat sports career there. But as far as MMA goes, Rozenstrike and Sakai pretty even here. 2 losses for both of them. Both guys around the same number of wins. Both guys in the, you know, the teens there with their wins. Both guys looking to do some damage in this heavyweight division. And that's why this fight here, I'll be curious to see what happens on Monday or Tuesday for whoever wins this fight as far as the UFC rankings go. And let me pull up the rankings actually right now so I get this right, but as far as where they're at sitting right now. But whoever wins this fight, in my opinion, and it's tough because of the guys that are sitting ahead of them and the current state of the UFC heavyweight division, new faces, guys moving around, and Ngannou now being the champ. But whoever wins this fight, in my opinion, is probably going to break into that top 5 somewhere of the heavyweight rankings in the UFC. And obviously that's a big deal. You know, the heavyweight division is the, you know, it's the creme de la creme, right? It's the cream of the crop, especially in the UFC, which is the highest promotion you can be in mixed martial arts. Well, in my opinion, obviously, it is that. So if you're in that top 5 of the heavyweight division in the UFC, it's a big deal. And that's why either one of these guys really wants this. And of course, they get those, they're going to keep getting those top fights, get closer to maybe getting a title shot against Ngannou or Derek Lewis, whoever wins that matchup coming up later this summer in August, that Dana White was saying he's looking to target that. But yeah, looking at it right now, the exact rankings of both these guys. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, he's sitting at number 6 in the rankings. Augusto Sakai sitting at number 9. So, you know, if Sakai wins, maybe they move him up to number 6 because it is ahead of him Volkov, Blades, Cyril Gain, Derek Lewis, and Stipe Miocic, and then, of course, Francis Ngannou. It's kind of tough to move any of those top 5 guys around. But maybe if Sakai wins, maybe they just decide to put him in that 6th spot where Rozenstruik is. But, you know, Rozenstruik is at number 6, though. So I can make a case that maybe you drop a Blades down. You know, maybe you drop Volkov down one because Volkov's still going to get, he has a matchup of his own coming up here. Cyril Gane, I think he belongs there. I don't think you're going to mix those top three up, but, maybe number 4 and number 5 is up for grabs, or at least that number 6 spot, which is still a big deal that you're close to that top 5. So bottom line is this has some ramifications, some big ones in the UFC heavyweight division, and both these guys are going to be gunning for that. Now, both these men have suffered some ups and downs lately. Augusto Sakai, he's coming off of a stoppage loss against Alistair Overeem. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, he's coming off of a couple losses himself. He had the Ngannou loss, then he actually was able to get back into the win column, but then after that, against Junior Dos Santos, but then after that, of course, back in February, he lost to Cyril Gane by decision. So this fight has a lot of ramifications, and whoever gets near that top 5, it's going to be big to them. So let's get into it. Let's dig deeper into the matchup here, the strengths, weaknesses of both men. We'll start out with Jairzinho Rozenstruik, what he does well. He's got some short, quick, powerful punches at times. He likes to counter with 2, 3, 4 strikes when he does. And I'll get to some more of his counter punching in a little bit here. He's got some good head kicks, very fast head kicks. That's that kickboxing background. That's that combat sports background that he comes from into the mixed martial arts realm, into the UFC here. He's got an okay jab when he uses it. Could it be better? Yes, but when he does use it, I do think it's all right. He'll pounce on your one mistake, and we saw that with Alistair Overeem. And we've seen that a couple times, even in the Junior Albini fight, where Junior Albini and him, they're kind of stalemating for a while there. And, did Rosenstrike have some missed, punches? Did he have some moments, some flurries where you go, he was close to knocking Junior Albini out? Yeah. But then all of a sudden, second round, he finds that one mistake from Junior Albini, he explodes into it, makes him pay for it. Same thing with the Alistair Overeem fight, where Overeem's looking great for 5 rounds, winning the fight, probably going to win by decision. And then final part of the fight, gets hit with a wicked shot. Just boom, just a right hand goes down. Of course, the lip, for many out there who have seen that, it's the famous lip now of Overeem that's almost split open, nasty stuff from that shot from Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So one mistake from Rozenstruik will end your day. So he'll pounce on those one mistakes. I just mentioned it a little bit. He's a pretty good counter puncher overall when he wants to, and I'm going to keep using that word when he wants to. He's got a nice counter left hook. I thought in the Ngannou fight, when he was backing up and Ngannou came in and knocked him out, melted him within a short amount of time in that first round, just came out and steamrolled him. Rozenstruik tried to throw a counter left hook actually in that exchange and just missed with it. That's what he goes to a lot. He doesn't always land it. He's not super accurate with it, but it's one of those punches that when he does throw it, if he does clip you on the chin, you're going good night probably. So he does got that nice counter left hook. He needs to place it more accurately. Sometimes he needs to time it better. His footwork needs to be better. I'll get into the weaknesses in a second. But he does throw that left hook. It can turn the lights out if he catches you with it. And then last strength here for Rozenstruik. He does explode into combinations pretty well, and he does use some good athleticism when he uses it. And I think that's kind of, and I'll use that to transition into the weaknesses here for Rozenstruik, that overall, I just wish you would see some adjustments here and there for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's got a bit of power, and my guy Sean Stargaryen coming up in part number 2 of the show, we talked about it, and he made the point that he doesn't think Rozenstruik actually has as much power as people think he does. And I somewhat agree with him actually on that. And you look at it, and you look at the resume. Listen, anybody that's got, anybody that's finished as many fighters as Rozenstruik has in his career, he's got 10 knockouts. Let me make sure I get this right. Yeah, he's got 10 knockouts in his career. He's got 11 wins, 10 of them by knockout. Whenever that happens, there's this big giant notion that guy's got a ton of punching power. And while I'm not saying, and why John's also not saying that he doesn't have any punching power, you also have to look at, and I've done this for many guys throughout MMA, boxing, you have to look at who they've beaten and who they've been knocking out. Now, the one I would immediately go to and say, this shows that that he has some decent power, is Andrei Arlovski, a guy who's always been pretty tough in his career, tough to put away. I think he's the ultimate litmus test for a lot of young fighters, guys like even Tom Aspinall who are coming up. I always say to myself, if they can put away Andrei Arlovski, they've got better than average power. They've got the skills, the tools to be able to develop into an elite heavyweight finisher, an elite heavyweight guy. But I'm starting to creep away from that just a little bit, though, because you do look at Arlovski's career. He has at points where he is getting knocked out. Again, it's 2 elite power punchers, but even the Aspinall fight, it's going to show that he was submitted, but he was hurt in that fight. He was hurt a couple times, actually, in that fight. So I'm starting to get away a little from that. Again, I'm not saying Rozenstruik has no power. I think he has some good power. Anytime you're going to do that, you have to respect it, but I went through the 10 knockouts that he has in his career, and overall, all 10 opponents, and this is a little hindsight, it doesn't always work, but the 10 opponents that he's knocked out in his career, Junior Dos Santos, everybody, to the beginning of his career, all the way back in the day, they have a combined 57 losses by knockout. So these are guys that are getting knocked out a lot, and even the Overeem fight that Rosenstrike won. I mean, we know what Overeem is now. We know Overeem gets hurt a lot, and he was hurt badly in that fight at the end, and then, referee stops it. So he's got power, but I'm not going to say it's elite power. So, but he still has it. I think that's my point, again, transitioning back into it, getting back on track here. He's got some power, so that is a plus for him, right? He's got some athleticism when he uses it right, when he throws his combinations together and he uses his jab and he uses that athleticism to get into some of those combinations and throws those head kicks and then mixes in the punches with them, is boxing with those things. He's very tough, but he doesn't put a lot of those together sometimes. It's very frustrating. That's why he needs to make small adjustments here and there, Rosenstrike does. And if he is able to do that at some point, put more punches together, all that stuff, often and consistently, I think he would be a different fighter right now. I think we'd be talking about a different fight between Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Augusto Sakai here. But again, he's got some positives, but here's the weaknesses, and this is where he needs to adjust on some things. Ground game for sure. If you get him to the ground, he's done an okay job in his career getting back to his feet, actually. And we saw somebody on the Bellator card last, Bellator 259, Fabian Edwards, do this, where Rozenstruik's so strong and gifted athletically and so explosive when he wants to be that he can actually get up. He's got a good get-up game. He's not easy to keep on the ground, but his ground game isn't there, though. He's not going to work you jiu-jitsu-wise. He's not going to really use any wrestling on you. You can work him if you get him down and you get in the right positions. Alistair Overeem did that. That was the Augusto Sakai fight, but he was doing that before, though. The knockout, Overeem was getting in on those wrestling, getting in on those double leg takedowns, getting in on those trips, and getting Rozenstrike down to the ground and able to use all of the wrestling to control him. So the weaknesses for Rozenstrike, the ground game certainly. He can be pushed back a lot. That's because of the inactivity. That's because sometimes he does want to go counterpunch. It's not always the best thing when you're not as accurate as he is, though, with his counterpunches. His footwork when striking and wrestling, he stands flat-footed a little bit. Stands very square to his opponent at times. Keeps his head on the center line too much. That's an issue for him. He doesn't really take the head off the center line. He's very much got that kickboxing style, the stance, everything, where head straight on the line, a little square at times. Especially when he throws his right hand. When he throws his right hand, he can get even a little bit more square with his stance coming forward on you. That leaves his head even more exposed, to being hit and countered when he's on his way in. So there's a lot of things that you like about Rozenstrike, but there's a lot of things, too, that you want to see him improve upon moving forward if he's going to be successful. And this is going to be a tough fight for him. And getting to the Augusto Sakai part now. Sakai, really solid footwork. For a heavyweight especially, he really uses his feet to cut off the octagon and attack from different angles all the time. Augusto Sakai measures you. He circles, and then he works his way in with those angles. He's the opposite of Rozenstrike a little bit, where in Rozenstrike, not that he doesn't circle ever, but it's more of Sakai the way he does it. He cuts off the octagon. He cuts it off, and he attacks from different angles with that footwork instead of coming in square or from one constant angle there. So he uses those great angles. He's got great timing with his punches. He gets your timing down pretty quickly, and that's an impressive thing about Sakai that I love, that you watch some of his past fights, he'll get your timing down pretty quickly. And that's important in the heavyweight division because you're going to be facing big, heavy hitters who one shot puts you out. You don't have, the smaller weight classes, maybe you have 5 minutes, maybe you have 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes to get your timing going and get off. You don't have that in the heavyweight division. You have to get it down immediately. And Sakai has that. He's got some great timing. He gets it down right away. And then once he does, he starts timing all of his shots. Uses some feints really well, uses his jab, good leg kicks, super solid Muay Thai all around. I mean, his elbows in the clinch are just nasty when he starts getting them off on you. His knees are really good. And when he really starts getting everything going, it's really tough because he's using the angles, he's using some of his boxing combinations, and then he's using that Thai boxing of elbows and knees in the clinch, and he's got you, and he's pushing you up against the cage. There's nowhere to go. It's a tough place to be, and he puts multiple punches and knees and elbows together. So it's not just one or two shots. He's looking to throw 3, 4, 5, 6 punches, strikes at a time in all of his combinations. So very good from Augusto Sakai. Likes to walk you down, back you up against the cage. Throws some nasty kicks up the middle as well with that Muay Thai. And he's good at closing the distance and smothering you. That's a part of cutting off the octagon and getting you in those Muay Thai clinch situations up against the cage where what do you do when your back's against the cage? Now, Rosenstrike can try to counterpunch, and other guys can try to counterpunch and counterstrike with guys or shoot in on a takedown. But a lot of times you're just going to accept positions. You're going to try to, get into a defensive shell, try to survive those or circle out of the corner, which can be very tough with his footwork. So Sakai's got a lot of things you got to love. Is he perfect though? No, he's still got some weaknesses. He can drop his hands pretty low at times, drops his guard when he's throwing shots, especially boxing combinations. He really leaves himself exposed. That's dangerous in the heavyweight division. 5-round fights, I think that's a question mark. He's only been in one 5-round fight in his career. And he got stopped by Alistair Overeem in a fight that was starting to grind on him. He was starting to get tired. And I use this word with John Stargaryen as well that you'll hear coming up in part 2. We'll use this phrase to describe it. I'm not going to say he gassed out, but he was starting to really be grinded down in that fight. He was still in the fight, and maybe you could call that gassing out. Maybe he would have fully gassed out eventually, but he was starting to gas out a little bit. He was starting to grind it down in that fight. For sure was Augusto Sakai. So 5 rounds here, 5-round main event. What if this fight goes deeper? Could be an interesting storyline there. His bottom game, when Overeem did put him on the bottom, I don't think Rosenstrike's going to put him on bottom, but future fights, that could be something to definitely watch out for, that if he does get put on bottom, can he get back? Is he going to close his guard? Where's that jiu-jitsu game there for Augusto Sakai? And that takedown defense, that's part of that. I do like Augusto Sakai, and I forgot to mention this actually in the strengths here. Augusto Sakai, when he does get some of his own wrestling going, when he gets some of his jiu-jitsu, and he gets some of his top game going with some of his ground and pound, he's pretty nasty there as well. So it's just when he's on bottom, when you're going to shoot on him and you're trying to take him down, and when he's tired. I mean, that's a point too in the Overeem fight, that he was getting more tired in that fight. Wasn't able to fight back, stuff those takedowns like he was maybe when he was fresher early in the fight. So something to watch there, all the weaknesses, all the strengths of both men. And I also, last one actually, this is more of a what-if scenario, and it's something I did notice as well in the Overeem, then I'll get to my official prediction here. But what happens when you push Augusto Sakai back against the cage? What happens when you push him back? And you find this a lot with fighters. When they are the pressure fighter and then all of a sudden they're being pressured, some guys deal with it really well. Some guys learn to deal with it well, but some guys don't know how to do it right away and have to learn it, or they never learn it and they really struggle. I wonder where Sakai is going to be, because he looked a little uncomfortable when he was being pushed back by Alistair Overeem. Rosenstrike, when he does explode and use athleticism, yes, he can push you back a little bit. Does he do it consistently? No, he doesn't. Again, part of those things he needs to adjust upon. And if Rosenstrike did that, I'd actually think this might be, I think it's already going to be an interesting fight. I think it'd be even more of an interesting fight if Rosenstrike did that. But even more so for future fights. What happens when Sakai is getting pushed back? Got to be able to counter, got to be able to do something to throw your opponent's rhythm off, throw off that pressure. I wonder if Sakai has that ability yet. What we'll see moving forward. A prediction time here for Augusto Sakai versus Alistair Overeem. Who's going to make it maybe into the top 5, or maybe into that number 6 spot, at least near the top 5? I think it's going to be Augusto Sakai. And you may have been able to guess that by the strengths and weaknesses and my tone of how I'm talking about both these men. But I really just think Sakai's the better fighter here. I think he's the more overall package. I think he's the guy that possesses the more tools. I think he has the better volume. I think his pressure's better, his octagon control. I think his ground game's a little bit better than Rosenstrike's, obviously. I just think overall he's got the better tools. And I think when he pushes Rosenstrike back, as long as he doesn't catch big bombs and he's working his way in with those angles, I think he's really going to have some success getting on the inside of Rosenstrike, using those elbows, using those knees, getting him up against the cage, and then maybe hurting him at some point. Now, you are playing with fire, and I mentioned Sakai's weaknesses himself. He does drop his hands. Sometimes when he's throwing, he does leave his hands a little low, doesn't keep his guard up like he should at times. So you're always going to play with fire in the heavyweight division when you fight like Sakai does sometimes, where you're going to look to get on the inside, push guys up against the cage, and get in those clinches, those short situations where you could eat a nasty little short punch, something like that, a flash knockout. But overall, Rosenstrike's accuracy of his counters, his footwork, I don't see it from Rosenstrike being able to deal with Augusto Sakai here. It is a heavyweight fight. You can never take it out of the question. He does have enough power to hurt guys, obviously, when he connects with the right shot. So I think he obviously still could. We haven't seen anything that makes you think that Sakai has no chin. Overeem was chipping away with ground and pound, nasty elbows, cutting him up, was chipping away at him. It wasn't necessarily one big shot that put out Augusto Sakai. So, is one shot from Rosenstrike here going to put out Sakai? I guess, but I sense that's not what's going to happen. I sense, even if Rosenstrike, unless he connects with a perfect shot, right on the chin, right on the temple somewhere that knocks his equilibrium off or something like that, I see Sakai being able to maybe, even if he does get hit, survive some of these exchanges, some of these flurries from Rosenstrike, and then be able to go to work with the volume, with the pressure, put him away, maybe get him to the ground, get his wrestling game going, just overall chip away at Rosenstrike. And I see him getting a knockout or TKO victory rounds 1, 2, maybe 3. I don't see it going deep, and that's why I think Sakai, we're going to have to wait for that 5-round question. I don't think we're going to see him get deep into this fight, as deep as he even got in the Overeem fight. And I think he might have learned some things from there. Listen to both guys at the media day this week, media availability between Rosenstrike and Augusto Sakai. And again, if you want all that coverage every single week, whether it be the UFC, Bellator, boxing, I was tweeting out a lot of the quotes today from the Floyd Mayweather Logan Paul media availability session that they had. I did it the other day with UFC Vegas 28. Follow me on Twitter at ManInTheCagePod. I tweet out all those quotes. You can get all of that from media days every single week, no matter what the promotion or MMA or boxing, whatever the combat sports you're into is. But listening to these guys, it was interesting to hear, and Augusto Sakai seemed like he took a lot away from his losses. Credit to Rosenstrike sometimes too. He was saying that he switched some things up. I would have liked to hear a little bit more from Rosenstrike. Again, there was a little bit of a language barrier between both these guys, at the media availability. So I'm not going to take it with too, take some of these things with a grain of salt a little bit. It is just media day talk too. But I definitely like some of the things I'm hearing from Augusto Sakai, even more so versus Rosenstrike. So I think Sakai's going to learn some things from that 5-round loss, from that loss in that 5-round fight, versus Alistair Overeem. And I think he's going to come out and be a different fighter here. I think he's going to go out there and work Rosenstrike, get the victory. So I have Sakai winning by TKO or knockout some point in those first 3 rounds. I'll say round 2, Sakai gets it done. If not round 1, early on in the fight, does Augusto Sakai over Jairzinho Rozenstruik and breaks into that 6th spot or that top 5 in the UFC heavyweight division. And Sakai is a very interesting heavyweight to me. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not the biggest puncher in the world. Speaking of punchers, but his pressure, some of the things he brings, he's going to be tough for a lot of these heavyweights, for sure. He's got some things to clean up, but I like what he brings, and we'll see what if he brings it coming up Saturday night at UFC Vegas 28. All right, that's the main event of the evening, going top to bottom on that one. I'll go through these next ones a little bit quicker. Won't go through the strengths and weaknesses to all these today, as we have a lot more to get to on the podcast. But co-main event, we also have another heavyweight clash. Walt Harris taking on Marcin Tybura. This one, and I tweeted it out earlier this week, and I'm going to talk about it again with John coming up, that I believe this is a fight where most of the time you're not going to tell a fighter, this is a terrible game plan. I mean, for life, for anything really, right? To tell somebody, hey, the first part of something, just go lay it all on the line. That's what only thing that matters is the first part of something. If you don't do it then, you're never going to do it. That's not a great advice for anybody, especially a fighter, to go, hey, you know what? You have to go win round 1. If you don't win in round 1, you might be a little screwed, right? But for Walt Harris here, I think that might be the best advice you can give this guy. Now, Walt Harris, credit to him, speaking of media days this week, he was talking about coming into this fight, being in a different mindset. Last year with Anaya Blanchard, his stepdaughter, who, of course, sadly passed away. And again, all the thoughts to the Harris family and everybody, that dealt with that situation. That's just so horrible, so horrific. He talked about how he shouldn't have been fighting at the time. Hindsight, he shouldn't have been fighting. Obviously, he shouldn't have been fighting. Nobody's in their right mind is going to be okay and be able to go out there and focus on a fight, and be able to go focus on an athletic competition, and be able to go, compete at a high level, the elite level that they normally compete at. So that, Walt Harris, like he said in the media day this week, he said it, he shouldn't have been fighting that, and I agree with him. And now he says, though, he's past a lot of that, and I also agree with him there that, time away from things, time can bring you some sense of putting things in the past a little bit. And, not that it'll ever be officially put in the past. He's always going to be thinking about his stepdaughter. He talked about that at the media day, all the great work. And what an amazing guy, by the way, Walt Harris is. Win or lose, he could finish under 500 in his MMA career. He's still, a great person, a great man. He's doing such a great job. He talked about with his family passing new acts in Congress and doing works with some foundations to go find other missing people and trying to locate people and trying to bring, young women and young girls, young boys, young women, young men back home to their families when they're missing or something's, going wrong like that. So it's amazing work for Walt Harris and what he's doing with his family with all of that. But, and that's, I think it's part of him starting to, get into a better mindset and getting ready to fight again. And that's where he is right now, I feel, where he's always going to have his stepdaughter on his mind. He's always going to have those things that happen. But now I think he's in a better state of mind where he is going to be able to go out there and go slug it out with Marcin Tybura and just put it all on the line. Just, this is my fight. I'm focused on it. I'm going to go put it on the line. And I think that's the Walt Harris we're going to get. And he needs to go do that because he's been on a little bit of a free fall again. He admitted he shouldn't have been fighting. This is his chance here against Marcin Tybura. And I think he's got to go lay it out on the line, though. So in the first round. And again, I do think, though, that some of what he said this week and some of what he's saying he's trying to change, could we see Walt Harris, and this is the point I was trying to make to begin with, could Walt Harris be a little bit of a different fighter now that he's refocused? Could Walt Harris go out there and show a better gas tank off? Could he go out there and show some more stamina? Could he go out there and show some more conditioning off and be more than just a flurry type of fighter where he gets gassed out after throwing some flurries, or, round 2, round 3 starts to get worn down a little bit? Yeah, he could be. But what we've seen from Walt Harris in his career generally is that he's not that guy. So I think Walt Harris got to go let it hang all on the line in this first round. Marcin Tybura is traditionally a kickboxer when he's striking. He can get chin checked. Augusto Sakai, speaking of him, he knocked out Marcin Tybura by doing the same thing, getting on the inside, chin checking him. I think Walt Harris, if he uses his athleticism, gets on the inside, big puncher, let some bombs fly in that first round, I think he gets Tybura out of there. I think for Tybura, the key for him is going to be shoot a takedown early and use your jiu-jitsu. He's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's good on the ground when he gets there. He's got to get the fight there early. And if not, I think it's going to be a long 5 minutes for him. Now, I think the thing that'll equalize everything is after those 5 minutes, let's say Walt Harris doesn't get Tybura out of there. Hurts him, doesn't hurt him, whatever. Wins the round even. Maybe he hurts him. But if Tybura is able to get out of that round and he's not in too bad a shape, I think rounds 2 and 3, he could start to use some more of those kickboxing skills as Walt Harris will tire a little bit. He will get grinded down a little bit. And then Tybura can get those kicks off better, stay on the outside, then get on the inside, get in the clinch, get Walt Harris to the ground, and be able to win the fight that way, maybe even submit him, maybe even finish him on the ground with some of his ground and pound, maybe round 2. So for Walt Harris, the key is go out there first round, let it fly. Let it fly. Be smart about it, but go let it fly in that first round. And for Tybura, it's, try to shoot a takedown early on, or you better hold on. You better get a death grip on something because watch out. Walt Harris hits hard, and he's athletic. He will come in on him. He will chin check him. So I think those are the keys for both men. Which one do I see happening? I'm going to say Walt Harris by knockout. I think Tybura, and Tybura's on a different run right now. He had a great 2020. Great 2020. Changed a lot. He even talked about, being more of an athlete now and trying harder and doing some different things in his camp that he wasn't doing when he said he wasn't trying as hard and that's why he was losing. I like it. But at some point, things will catch up with you still. And I think the fact that he does leave himself open defensively will catch up with him here against Walt Harris. I keep waiting for it to happen, but Tybura keeps thwarting this with some good fights, some good game plans. He could do the same thing here. Would not shock me at all. Walt Harris, though, I'm going to go with him by knockout round 1. I think he gets the job done. I think he goes out there, lets it all hang out, puts some of the frustrations of everything, this last year, losing fights, of course, everything that happened on his family. I think he's going to let it all out on Marcin Tybura in this fight and get the knockout win. So that's Walt Harris, Marcin Tybura in the heavyweight division. 2 good heavyweight fights. Another reason why I think even casual fans will really like this UFC Vegas 28 card, that you do get 2 heavyweight fights that cap off the night. Rest of the main card, you have Roman Dolidze taking on Laureano Staropoli. I'll move through this one a little bit quicker so I can get to some of the other ones I want to talk about more too. But Dolidze, Staropoli, I'm going to go with Staropoli in this one. I'm not super confident in that, but Dolidze, some of the things we've seen, including last time out, he's got some striking skills, obviously, some good striking skills, but his grappling, he just goes for lower leg submissions, leg locks, ankle submissions, things like that. It's not a recipe to be very good on the ground in the UFC and at such a high level of mixed martial arts. He's got some strength, so could he do something? Yes, but Laureano Staropoli, he's out there training with shootbox team. He has a shootbox style, which isn't always best, sometimes for facing another striker with some power. But Staropoli goes out there. I think his shootbox, I think it's good enough. I think a lot of even his grappling, I think, is good enough to deal with Dolidze. So I see this being a close fight. The odds makers right now seeing it being Dolidze as a favorite. He's not a huge favorite, though. I might even go a little lower than that. I think this is a close fight. I think Staropoli, though, at the end of the day, his shootbox style and what Dolidze has shown us, the holes in his game, I think they get exposed here again. Dolidze, he's got to clean up some things. And I don't like what he's saying this week at Media Day. I want to hear a guy who's really making a lot of adjustments. And I don't hear that from him yet. I hear a lot of Staropoli doing a lot of different things and working on his game constantly. I like Staropoli here, but it should be a close fight in my opinion between Dolidze and Staropoli. But I'll go Staropoli in this one. I'll say he gets the decision victory, maybe a split decision or a unanimous decision victory in this one against Roman Dolidze. Next one up, another one that's very impactful, one I'm very excited about. Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Miguel Baeza. This one is going to be a massive test for, I'll say Miguel Baeza because he's a prospect, or was a prospect who's still that hot up-and-coming guy. But I'm also going to go on the other end and say this is also a big test for Santiago Ponzinibbio. I'll give Ponzinibio his last fight out. Of course, he got stopped by Li Jingliang. I will give him a pass on that fight. I will say, Ponzinibio, I will give you a pass on your last fight, that knockout loss in the first round, because of all the injuries, because of all the time off outside the ring, outside the octagon, all that octagon rust he came in with. I'm going to give him a pass for that because that's not the Ponzinibio we normally see. Not saying Miguel Baeza can't win the fight here, even stop him, but I'm going to give Ponzinibio a little bit of a pass. But it's still a test for him here because the test is that the new Ponzinibio? Was it truly ring rust, octagon rust, or has the game caught up with you a little bit? Are these young guns, are they starting to surpass you now? You know, it sucks for everybody. Again, father time, injuries, all our bodies, they do something different. Maybe all this time away, maybe he lost a step and maybe these young guys are coming up and they're even, or they're getting, they're moving past him now. So this is a big test for both guys. Who passed it? I'm going to say it's Ponzinibio though. And another one I'm not super confident in because Miguel Baeza's got some really fast hands. He throws some lanky kicks up the middle. We saw that in the Matt Brown fight. We've seen it in all of his fights. He's got very fast hands, as I said. He uses some wrestling here and there. He's got a lot of tools. He's got power. He's got lightning quick power with that. So could he, land a big shot here on Ponzinibio, turn the lights out, finish him, or at least just beat him up, and get the decision? Absolutely, Miguel Baeza could. But Ponzinibio, the 28-4 fighter that he is before the Li Jingliang loss, which again I'm giving him a pass for, so let's say he's 28-3, that Ponzinibio was great. And that Ponzinibio was vying for world title shots. It's the injuries, it's the time away that took that away from him. If any form or any part of that, 90%, 95%, 100% of course, Ponzinibio, that old Ponzinibio was still there with him, I think he beats Miguel Baeza. I think he schools him a little bit here. Ponzinibio's got some good striking skills, of course. His pressure, staying in your face, it gives a lot of guys problems. Speaking of pressure, yeah, Baeza could counterpunch here. When you have fast hands like him, you can counterpunch for days with guys. But I think Ponzinibio's pressure here, and staying in guys' face and stalking him in his own power and his own timing, and being able to pull the trigger this time, because that was the problem in the Li Jingliang fight that I had with him. I actually thought he looked okay. He was pushing Li Jingliang up against the cage. He was walking him down, stalking him like he normally does. The issue was he had a hard time pulling the trigger in that fight. He seemed like he was hesitant at times, couldn't pull the trigger. Then he starts getting it going a little more, and Li Jingliang hits him with a nice shot, knocks him out. Here, if he's able to start throwing, be smart though. He's going to have to deal with that. He could have some scary moments in this fight. Could get caught with some shots. If he plays it smart though, times his shots like he normally does, Ponzinibio, I think he wins this fight. I think he goes out there and gives Baeza a vet lesson, a vet session here, if you will, that I think he's going to go out there, win the fight. Does he knock him out? Not necessarily. It could be a decision win. Would I be surprised again, though, if he stops him here? It's not shocking to see a young prospect, a young fighter like Miguel Baeza go in there with a hungry shark like Ponzinibio, which still has a lot of skills left, and get put away. The Matt Brown fight, we're not too removed from that still. Baeza was hurt in that first round with a big elbow from Matt Brown, and that's Matt Brown. He's got no chin. He's got almost nothing left really in his arsenal that can really be dangerous to young fighters like Miguel Baeza, and he still hurt him in that fight. Now, maybe he learned from that. It's the fight game. Anything happens. All it takes is one shot. Maybe he got a lucky shot in, or maybe timed a shot well. Whatever it is. I still think, though, that you still have to look at that and take it into account. I think Ponzinibio gets the job done here. I'll say by decision. You know what? Actually, I'll say Ponzinibio by knockout. I think he knocks Miguel Baez out here. I'll go out there. I'll say he knocks him out in this fight. But a decision's probably there too, depending on how the fight goes. But I'll say Ponzinibio by knockout. Baeza by knockout also very, very much in play in this fight. I do think with his quick hands, and Ponzinibio, he's going to get chin. His chin's going to get tested again. And does he pass it this time around, or does he crumble like he did against Li Jingliang? We will see the second time around here for Ponzinibio on this UFC Vegas 28 card. But I am going to go with Santiago Ponzinibbio. We'll say I was going to go decision, but I'll say by knockout. We'll say round 3. I'll give Baeza till round three to get knocked out. I think he has some interesting moments in this fight, though, against Ponzinibio. All right, rest of this card, Dusko Todorovic taking on Gregory Rodrigues. Rodrigues coming off of an LFA 108 win over Josh Fremd, knocked him out cold. Big upset there, gets the call to the UFC. I mean, hearing him this week talk about how much it meant to him and his family, awesome. And he gets a fight here against Todorovic. Unfortunately for Rodrigues, and I do think he has some power, I don't think he's totally inept in this fight. Unfortunately for him, though, Todorovic, he's got some good output, some good volume, some good boxing skills. I think Todorovic is going to be too much for Gregory Rodrigues here. I had Rodrigues losing to Josh Fremd. I thought Josh Fremd was probably that win away from getting a call to the UFC. I don't think Josh Fremd is great. I think he's not going to sniff a title ever. I don't know how long he would stay around in a promotion like the UFC. We'll see because of how much of a risk taker he is and how many holes in his defense he has. But he's definitely an exciting fighter who goes and chases finishes, which Dana White loves. So I could have seen Dana White signing Josh Fremd after that one, and maybe even being in the spot against Dusko Todorovic. But instead, Rodrigues gets the win. He gets the fight here against Todorovic. The power's there. He's got things that could change the night. But I think at the end of the day, it's Todorovic. I think he gets a decision win. I don't think he necessarily puts him away, Gregory Rodrigues. But Rodrigues does have some holes in his game, though. So Todorovic definitely not out of play here in this fight for Todorovic. But I'm going to go Todorovic by unanimous decision. I think he goes out there, gets the job done against Gregory Rodrigues. As Rodrigues might be fighting with a little extra heart Saturday night, trying to just maybe even at one point, even if he is hurt, try to get to the bell, right? Try to get to that third round. But I'm going to go with Dusko Todorovic in that one. Last fight, the one that'll open up the UFC 28 main card. Tom Breese taking on Antonio Arroyo. This is the loser goes home, loser leaves town fight that I was talking about earlier that I teased a little bit. Tom Breese, up and down issues. He's been away from the game here at certain points of his career because of anxiety and other issues. Again, not saying anything about that, but making fun of the situation or anything. But, matter of the fact is, he hasn't been in the octagon. Now, I think he's overcome a lot of that, and obviously now he's fighting more consistently, which is good to see. But still, he was away for a while. Now he's coming back. He's been up and down here with some wins and losses since returning. Now he gets Antonio Arroyo, who is a guy who's coming off of 2 straight losses himself. So whoever loses this fight, especially Arroyo, I think Arroyo, three losses, that, of course, is like the kiss of death in the UFC. If you get those 3 losses in a row, you're gone. But I think Tom Breese might be gone, too, if he doesn't win this fight. So this is a big fight, whoever wins it. I think it's going to be Tom Breese, though. Now, Arroyo said he changed his camp up. He's training at Jackson Wink in New Mexico for this whole camp compared to Brazil. Said the weather, wasn't the coaches necessarily, but the weather. There were certain factors that he felt New Mexico, Jackson Wink, would be able to help him prepare more for Tom Breese. So maybe we get a new hungry Antonio Arroyo here who is one loss here, one bad moment away from getting cut by the UFC. We might get a hungrier one here, but I'm going to go with Tom Breese winning this fight. I think Tom Breese, his skills overall, his boxing and his striking, and then even his jiu-jitsu and grappling. He got submitted his last time out, but he's putting himself in a lot of bad positions, and he was actually fighting out of a lot of bad positions. That was such a tough fight that he was in. I think that I saw a lot of hunger in him. I saw a lot of guy who had a lot of skills, but it was just missing on certain ends here and there. So I think if Tom Breese does even that again against Antonio Arroyo here, even half that performance, I won't say half that. I think Arroyo's got some skills, but even if he's got most of that performance he had his last time out and just avoids a few other bad positions, I think Tom Breese can get the win here over Antonio Arroyo. So I'm going to go Tom Breese by unanimous decision here over Antonio Arroyo to open up the UFC Vegas 28 main card. And then moving down the list here, we have a bunch of prelims. Montana De La Rosa, Ariane Lipski. I'll go with De La Rosa in that one. Tanner Bozier, Ilir Latifi. I like Tanner Bozier in this one, unless he gets taken down. If Latifi starts using his wrestling, then great. But I like Tanner Bozier when he is getting off a lot of his leg kicks, throwing a lot of those, chopping down the tree, using a lot of his movement. I think that's why Latifi's going to have a hard time wrestling in this fight too. That I think Bozier is going to use a lot of his movement to stay away from Latifi, keep catching him, play on the outside, maybe eventually hurt Latifi in this one. Then you can go in there, rush, for the kill shot, close the window, if you will, close the show. But I think it's going to be Tanner Bozier in that one over Ilir Latifi. But if Latifi can get on in some double legs, use some of that strength, we've seen Bozier off his back before not be able to, get back up. So I'll go with him in that one. Francisco Trinaldo taking on Muslim Shalekov. should be a fun one there. I mean, anytime you get the Russians in there, as well as a Brazilian fighter, Francisco Trinaldo, the career that he's had, it's going to be a good one. I'm going to go with Trinaldo by upset here. I love Trinaldo, what he's done lately. He showed off some of his power. He's such a veteran. I think he's going to show off some of that power as well in this welterweight fight against Muslim Shalaikov here. It's going to be a fun fight, though. And, what Shalaikov, if he gets out there, gets some of his game off, would I be surprised if Trinaldo looks old and lost because he is older, like an older fighter? Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't think that's something you can rule out, certainly. But I'm going to go Francisco Trinaldo here. I mean, he's the plus 200 underdog, which tells you what Vegas thinks about him. But I like Trinaldo, what I've seen lately. I like what I've seen from him. Not that he's changed drastically in his career compared to where he was early in his career, but I think he's done a few things here and there that make me think that he has made some small adjustments and then he is going to move forward, even at the age of 42 years old, and be able to do some things here. Yeah, I mean, he's 3 straight wins. Bobby Green, John Makdessi, and Jay Herbert his last time out. The knockout, of course, which was a phenomenal left hand by Francisco Trinaldo. But, you look back, I mean, yeah, there was the James Vick loss, Kevin Lee. There were some losses there, obviously, that he hasn't looked great in, but I like Francisco Trinaldo here to get the win. Maybe not by knockout because Shalaikov hasn't been knocked out in his career ever, but I do think he's going to be able to get some of his punches off and get the decision win here. And by the way, Trinaldo's never been knocked out himself either, which that's the reason why I think, too, that if Shalaikov wins, either way, I think this fight goes the distance probably. That I do think this fight probably makes it to the bell, makes it to the third round. I don't think it's going to be Shalaikov being able to get some of his power off, though. He's going to have to use some wrestling and be clean with the strikes and win a decision that way, which is hard against a veteran like Trinaldo. So if he does, hats off to him. But I'm going to go Trinaldo. I think his toughness, and it's hard to believe that Shalaikov is actually 36 years old himself. I mean, that's another reason why, I'm going to go with Trinaldo here. His toughness, I don't think he's going to get knocked out, and I think he's going to stay in the fight, stay in Shalaikov's face, and eventually get the decision win in that one. Makwan Amirkhani versus Kamil Leclerc. Makwan Amirkhani is going to work him on the ground. Does he get too tired at some point to maybe not finish the fight? Sure. But I think he's going to finish him at some point before that. I think he's going to finish him before he gets tired. Makwan Amirkhani is going to get him on the ground, use that grappling, use that jiu-jitsu we've seen over the years from Amirkhani, and get that win over Kirk, who Kirk is, what is he, the second or third, I believe, substitute or replacement in this fight against Amirkhani. So I'll go with Makwan Amirkhani in that one by submission. We'll say round 1 or round 2. And that one, Alan Patrick taking on Mason Jones. One of the ones I'm more excited about, just because I'm such a big Mason Jones fan. I loved him in Cage Warriors. I loved what I saw from him. His toughness, his grit, his propensity to be in exciting fights, but also being exciting fights that are. This is such a weird. It's such a weird comment. He's in such brawls, such fun brawls to watch. But a lot of his brawls are so they're so technically savvy though. He is a technically sound fighter though. He does a lot of good technical things that not a lot of brawlers and a lot of guys like that like to do or do. And that's why Mason Jones is fun and he stays in your face even if you're hurting him. I mean, that's what kind of guy Mason Jones is. And we saw that in his first UFC fight and he got that O taken away from him. That was one of the toughest fights, by the way, Mason Jones in his UFC career that you will ever have. I mean, you go back and watch that in his MMA career. I mean, how many times do we see MMA fighters, especially young in their career, get gimmies right away, right? They'll be the first fight of the night on a pay-per-view, something like that, get gimmies. No, the UFC's like, we're going to give you Mike Davis and go out there, good luck, kid. And Mike Davis hits really hard. I mean, he's got some really good technical boxing himself. So I thought that was one of the toughest tests he could have had to start his UFC career, Mason Jones. I like him here against Alan Patrick. I think he gets the win. Does he get the stoppage at some point? I don't know, maybe. I think he's definitely going to try for it. And Mason Jones, just knowing how he fights, he grinds you down. Speaking of grinding, guys, he just stays on you. His jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, his striking, especially his boxing, he stays on you, and he'll just grind you down. If he's not going to hit you with one shot and hurt you, he'll just get a knockout by attrition by just beating you up. So could he do that against Patrick here? No, but Alan Patrick's got a pretty decent career himself, 15-3. I do think he loses, maybe even badly here, but he probably makes it to the bell. So I'll go Mason Jones by unanimous decision in that one. Originally, we were supposed to get Mannion Furiat taking on Morena Moroz in that one, and Moroz actually was a popular underdog pick among a lot of people. But that fight dropped off now, and now Manion Farroch, she actually gets a super short notice opponent here on UFC Vegas 28. She's now slated to face, let me find her name to make sure I get it right, Tabitha Ricci. That's right, Tabitha Ricci here. She now gets set to face her. Ricci, from what I've done some research on her and looking back, she trains with Mackenzie Dern. She's got a lot of grappling chops. Her striking's probably, and not probably, from what I've seen, from what I've heard, very rough, which is not going to be good against Manion Farroch, who she lands some devastating shots, and she's a good prospect up and coming. Now, does she get rolled up? Does something happen in the grappling department? Always the constant question, always the fun thing to debate with young fighters of, does the young fighter get out-grappled here? Does she get tripped up by the grappler? First time in her career here where she really faces somebody that has a lot of good grappling chops. I'm not saying Ricci can't have any moments in this fight grappling, but I think overall Manion Farroch, I think she's very solid. I think she's going to try to just stay away from those ground exchanges, obviously, and beat her up on the feet, probably to a finish at some point. This is super short notice. Someone with the striking chops like Manion Farroch that we've seen, she's going to get some finishes in her career. I think she gets one here as well against Tabitha Ricci. So I'm going to go Manion Farroch by, we'll say TKO or knockout round 1 or round 2. I think she beats her up enough eventually, stays away from those grappling exchanges to get the W there. Sean Woodson, next one up. We only have 2 more, and then I'll get to Mayweather and Paul in a second here, and then we'll wrap it up with that, and then I'll get to my guy, John Stargaryen, in part 2 of the show, go through all the betting tips for UFC Vegas 28. But 2 more here, then Mayweather-Paul card. Sean Woodson taking on Youssef Zalal. Zalal, when he first broke into the UFC, and he fought Austin Lingo on, UFC 247 back in Houston. I was at that fight. And when he first broke in, you liked a lot of what you saw from Zalal. And you thought, maybe this is a guy who the UFC, maybe a hidden gem a little bit, right? He's got a little bit of a sneaky finishing streak with his boxing and his striking. He's got a lot of good wrestling. He's a good scrambler. All those things. The more you watch Youssef Zalal, though, the more you realize that while I'm not saying he's a bum, and I'm not saying he's a bad fighter, and I actually think he belongs in the UFC, and I think he'll stick around a while, actually, because he's good enough to. But I'm not gonna say this sounds like you're ripping somebody, but I'm gonna say he's average. But I don't mean that he's average. He's got some good skills, but Youssef Zalal, a lot of the things he does, they're not elite though. He doesn't have a great really attribute about him really. Now Sean Woodson's also a younger guy here, so Youssef Zalal, these are guys that he's used to fighting not too long ago here before stepping into the UFC. I mean, even in the UFC, fighting Austin Lingo, fighting some of these other guys, he's used to fighting these up and coming, and this is kind of what Zalal is now. The UFC, Sean Shelby, those guys, the matchmakers, they're essentially saying for right now, Zalal, your role in this company is to be the underdog in a lot of fights, almost every fight, and you're going to fight Contender Series guys. You're going to fight guys that we see on other circuits coming up who we want to test them, or we want to give them a good fight, but we don't think necessarily a great fighter. I think that's what Youssef Zalal is. So I'm going to go with Sean Woodson here. I think he gets the W. Does he finish Youssef Zalal? I don't think so. I think Zalal's tough enough. I think he's got good enough skills, again, to hang around. I think that's why he's going to hang around a little bit. But I think Sean Woodson gets the win here over Youssef Zalal. I think Woodson has, again, and this is where the test is, and that's why this card's fun. There are some tests here and there. This is another test for Sean Woodson. I just kind of not ripped, but talked about Zalal being average in some things. Well, what are you, Sean Woodson? Do you have the average attributes too, or do you have anything great? We'll find that out against Youssef Zalal here. But I think he does here and there have something that's slightly a little bit better than Youssef Zalal. I think his striking's a little bit better than Youssef Zalal. Maybe Youssef Zalal is a little more technical at times. Maybe you like his striking a little bit more at times. But Sean Woodson, I think he has that more special factor to his game, that he could be a special fighter. I'm not saying he is, but I think he's got more things to his game that could be special compared to Youssef Zalal. It just depends if it comes out Saturday night. But I'm going to go with Sean Woodson against Youssef Zalal in that one. And then the fight to open up the card, Claudio Puelles taking on Jordan Levitt. Levitt, his last time out, had a spectacular win. He's looking for the same thing here against Puelles. I'm not impressed with Jordan Levitt's striking at all. It's very, very rudimentary. He leaves a lot of holes in his game. He's a great grappler. He's got some good grappling ability. But I don't know if that striking's there for Levitt, though. So this could be a greasy matchup, and the matchmakers see that. I mean, Levitt's a minus 200 favorite, so he's clearly a heavier favorite. But Claudio Puelles, I think he could give some issues in this fight to Jordan Levitt if he does certain things. Again, it's just what Jordan Levitt shows up. Is he constantly making improvements? Sean Woodson, again, talking about him, the younger fighters. This is something, Mason Jones, any of these guys, you can't factor in of what are they doing in the gym while they're away? What improvements are they making? What are these things that they're going to come back with the next time around and show off? if Jordan Levitt comes out and shows some different things off, same thing with Sean Woodson or maybe even Yusuf Zalal, give him credit there. Mason Jones, we throw Manny Inferior in there, although I think this is an easier test, obviously, for her now than Moroz would have been. Then, yeah, I mean, this could be a very different fight. Could be an easy fight for some of these prospects. But I'm going to go Claudio Puelles. I think from what I've seen Jordan Levitt, I'm going to go Puelles to get the upset. I think he gets the upset over Jordan Levitt. Maybe by split decision, maybe a close fight. Maybe a sneaky finish, we'll see. But I'm going to go Claudio Puelles in that one over Jordan Levitt. All right, that's UFC Vegas 28. I'll tweet out all my picks Saturday night as well before the card starts. Maybe I'll I'll change my mind rather on some of these like I have in the past. But I'm pretty set in a lot of these and pretty comfortable with a lot of these predictions. Again, though, I'll tweet out my official predictions top to bottom again coming up Saturday night before UFC Vegas 28. And again, stand by in just about 10 minutes or so here. I'm going to bring my guy John Stargaryen on the show from the Club and Sub podcast to talk about all of these fights coming up, UFC Vegas 28, the betting angles, and we'll break them down a little bit more too. And you can hear John's point of view, as well as if you go listen to the Club and Sub podcast, you can hear his points of view on those as well. But let's get to it. Floyd Mayweather, the last fight of the weekend, the last card of the weekend, I should say. I started the show going over this. It's weird to have a Sunday card. It's weird to have a Sunday combat sports card of any type, MMA, boxing, anything. But we do. We get coming up Saturday, or excuse me, I'm even saying it now. Floyd Mayweather said it today, actually, at the media availability today as well. He accidentally said Saturday a bunch of times too. Coming up Sunday night, Floyd Mayweather taking on Logan Paul. It's going to be a spectacle. It's already a sideshow. You're already seeing it among, well, the broadcasts themselves. I mean, even the other day, you're looking at, the media days, what some of these guys are saying. It's a sideshow, clearly. And, and you could go check out a lot of my other videos on episode 91 as well. I talked about Tyron Woodley being match made with Jake Paul. Their fight's going to come up in August. Another YouTuber fight, Jake Paul versus the former UFC welterweight champion, Tyron Woodley. I had some thoughts on that one, why his name was brought up, what I think could happen in that fight. You can go check out all of that on episode 91 of the Man in the Cage podcast. But we've seen even with some of that stuff, it's all a sideshow a little bit, but it's also for fun, and it also brings my general opinion on it. It brings a lot of eyes to the sport of boxing that might have not been there before. And it's an entertainment thing. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're entertained, what's so bad about that? And that's why, just a quick story here before I get into the actual card itself. I always talk to people about this, that, every summer, right? You get a lot of big movies every summer, sometimes in December, November, December, but a lot of times you get the big movies in November, December that are more the grittier stories, or the ones that are supposed to be, complete packages of stories that have action but are complete stories, like Star Wars, some of those that are the story, it's put together better, if you will, you know what I mean? But during the summer, you usually get, coming up June 25th, I think you get Fast and the Furious 9, right? You'll get these silly, fun, whatever, entertainment factor movies that have nothing, they don't have great stories at all. The acting's kind of cheesy at times, the storyline, the stunts, it's all crap sometimes, right? It's just bad. But you watch some of these, including Fast and the Furious, and you're entertained for a couple hours. But there's always those guys out there who, and you know who you are, there's always those guys out there who will, going into the summer movies, watching Fast and the Furious 9 or Fast and the Furious 5 or any of these movies, Top Gun, or we'll see what Top Gun is. We'll see. Maybe it's cheesy, maybe it's not. Anyway, any of those movies, though, you'll get that serious guy, right? The water cooler on Monday. The guy who just brings down all the fun in the room. The guy who comes in there and he's, Fast and the Furious, it's so dumb. I didn't watch it. I walked out of the theater. Or, I'm not going to go see that. It's terrible acting. Or the story was awful. I can't believe I wasted my money on that. It's like, bro, just chill out. It's like, just calm down. It's just for fun. It's a spectacle. Enjoy it for what it is and deal with it. I mean, that's the thing. And that's why the people that hate the YouTubers on boxing, it's like, deal with it. Don't watch it. That's your prerogative. You don't want to watch it, that's fine. I think there are more positives than negatives that will come through for this, though, through everything. I think there are more positives for sure. That what if there are some new boxing fans? What if there is intrigue into boxing? There's no problem with that. And frankly, I think this is something that should be welcomed throughout any sport that has been quote unquote, and I hate this because I'm a boxing fan, but dying over the years. I remember 5-10 years ago, I've always been such a big boxing fan, and MMA fan, of course, right? I'm a huge MMA fan. I'm a huge boxing fan. Over the years, though, 10 years ago especially, Vladimir Klitschko, was still the heavyweight champion of the world and Floyd Mayweather was dominating the sport of boxing, there was a lot of people that told me the sport I loved and the sport that I watched was dying. And that, kind of like, hey, why are you wasting your time on that? I hated that because I love boxing. I love combat sports. Obviously, I host a podcast now about it. I'm so passionate about it. But that's what people were saying. So what's wrong with this YouTube sensation? And that's where you have to get with it. If you don't like it, get out. Don't watch it. Deal with it, right? If you do, if you're okay with it though, and you're okay with just the entertainment factor and that there might be some new fans, then let's embrace it a little bit. And that's what Floyd's doing here on multiple levels. Floyd Mayweather fighting Logan Paul, because he gets paid a lot of money, obviously, but also he knows that, hey, I'm going to have people watching my fight that have never maybe watched a Floyd Mayweather fight ever. And they're going to see me knock this fool out. Get to my prediction in a second here. Official ones, and I have some of you that send in your own predictions for this fight, Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul. But, that's what's going to happen come up Saturday night. So I think this Sunday night, I said it to the kids, sorry. I think it's crazy, and I think it's dumb to just write this off, saying it's dumb, that the YouTubers are, they're bringing the sport down. I don't think they are. I think it's a short-lived thing. I don't think the YouTuber sensation will survive forever. But I think for right now, I think it's a good thing for boxing to gain some more traction, get some more fans. You get a Floyd fight back here. You get Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. I think eventually you're going to get a Jake Paul versus Floyd Mayweather fight, something like that, some bigger names out there. Conor McGregor even being floated around by Floyd Mayweather today. You're going to get these types of things that I think are good for the sport of boxing and mostly good for the sport. In fact, all probably good for the sport of combat sports. So I'm all for it. I'll get into it right now, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I normally did. I just went through Rosenstrike and Augusto Sakai, and obviously with those fights, I went through the strengths and weaknesses a little bit more. Not going to do that for this fight, obviously. Logan Paul, Floyd Mayweather, totally different animal. This is not your typical boxing fight. Logan Paul, does he have some okay boxing skills? I guess so. He's pretty strong, right? He's got some power. He can punch a little bit. I actually think Jake Paul is a better boxer. I actually respect Jake Paul's boxing ability way more than I do Logan Paul's ability. So, strengths and weaknesses, there they are for you for Logan Paul, I guess. That's the first on the Man in the Cage podcast where I'm just like, here you go. Here's a generalization about a fighter. This is what he is. That's what Logan Paul is to me. Floyd Mayweather, on the other hand, again, everyone kind of knows what he does. One of the best, if not, in my opinion, the greatest defensive fighter of all time. The Philly shell defense, his counter-punching ability. Early in his career, he showed off before he started moving up weight classes and giving up weight to guys. He showed off more power in those fights, would walk guys down. Just a lethal counterpuncher, right, is Floyd Mayweather. You already know that too about Floyd Mayweather. So those are the strengths and weaknesses of both guys, between both of them. I'll go through your predictions real quick, and then I'll get to mine. And I already gave it away a little bit, but I'll go through yours real quick before I get to mine. Just our insiders, the guys we've had on the show lately. Jeremy Harridges from who we had on episode 90, that is. You can still go check that out. I asked him about that fight. You can go follow him on Twitter at @ABoxingWriter. He writes for Fansided. He's the lead boxing contributor over there. Jeremy Harris has said it, and this has been the question I've been asking to everybody, friends, media, everybody. This is just what this is the kind of hard-hitting journalism you get on the Man in the Cage podcast of, does Logan Paul stand any chance? And Jeremy Harris just said, no, he doesn't stand really any chance. Floyd can end it when he wants to end it. Then we had on the other day, episode 91, had Jason from Glove Talk on. Also talked to him. You can follow him on Twitter at @glove_talk. Jason said something similar to Jeremy Harris's, that, looking at what Floyd's done in his career, all these things, no, Logan doesn't really stand much of a shot in this fight. I threw it out to all of you on Twitter at @ManInTheCagePod, on Instagram as well, at @ManInTheCagePod. Ask for your predictions for this weekend, what you think's going to happen with the fight. One of my good friends, Terry, I don't know if you want to go by Terry or Terrence, Terry Alaska Cross, he came out, and this is the prediction that he sent me. He said Mayweather toys with him for 3 to 5 rounds. And this is exact, right? So Harridges and Jason from Glove Talk, they gave me the general, just he's going to get destroyed. But this is how good of a boxing fan, how great of a boxing fan Terry is. He walked me through it here. He said Mayweather toys with him for 3 to 5 rounds. Lots of grabbing, holding from Paul. Money steps in midway through round 5 and gets him out of there via TKO in round 7. So that's his prediction there for that fight. And also had Gary John also reach out to me on Twitter. They're messaging me similar sentiments that Floyd, Gary actually out there saying that Floyd later in the fight will take over. John saying early on in the fight, he will land a big shot round 2 and be able to finish off Logan Paul. So everybody and their mom. I haven't heard one person yet. Now, it cracked me up on the Showtime because Luke Campbell, Morning Combat Show, they were hosting the Showtime media availability today for the Floyd Mayweather-Logan Paul media availability. And they were talking about, tomorrow, inevitably there will be somebody on Sunday who risks like an astronomical amount of money to bet on Logan Paul. You'll see it on Sunday. Someone will bet like a lot of money on Logan Paul. But to this point, I have not seen one person. There's probably some deep internet people out there, some YouTubers who have no idea anything about boxing who are predicting Logan Paul. They don't count though. Sorry, did I say a lot of? They don't count though. Anybody with any legitimate boxing combat sports knowledge, I have not seen one person predict Logan Paul to win this fight. Now, am I going to be the one person? All right, I need like a drum roll or something. Am I going to be the one person to predict that Logan Paul beats Floyd Mayweather or stands any chance? That's a better question even. Does he stand any shot against Floyd Mayweather Sunday night? Let me bring my hat out here. I have a special hat for all of you. All right? That's my answer. Absolutely not. He does not have any shot. Floyd, money, Mayweather, all the way. Yes, I'm bringing out the money team hat. Yes, I am I will be 30 years old on Saturday, nerdy white guy wearing a flat-brimmed The Money Team hat, but I'm doing it, baby. Floyd Money Mayweather, he's going to stop Logan Paul, and we'll say round 5. I'll say round 5 he stops him, maybe sooner. And I'm going to keep the hat on the rest of the show, by the way. Maybe I need to start wearing this all the way. Maybe that should be a new poll question. I have a poll question out there all weekend. I'll actually read that off before I get off the show here, episode 92, and I'll keep it up open until Sunday's show. I'm cracking myself up wearing this. I should wear it more, though. I got it in Las Vegas years ago. I'm not going to give you the whole story. Maybe I should wear this more, but then maybe that'll be the next poll question. Is it okay for me to wear a flat-brimmed hat like this? Or should I, now that I brought this out, am I forced to wear this on every show moving forward? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe you guys can tweet at me again, at Man in the Cage Pod on Instagram, at Man in the Cage Pod. But my other point too, I did have a poll up there on the interest level for this fight. I'll read that off before the end of the show today. But I have Floyd Mayweather winning this fight by knockout some point in round 5 or earlier. I think Floyd Mayweather comes out. I think he's able to survive the early storm. I think Logan Paul is going to come out with a lot of punches. I think he's going to come out with a lot of trying to use his strength and trying to push Floyd Mayweather back into the corner, back against the ropes. Similarly, obviously he's not a professional fighter the way Marcus Maidana is, but similarly to what Marcus Maidana did late in their fight, in their career. When Marcus Maidana, the first time around, we'll say had some success against Floyd Mayweather. Obviously, he lost both fights. Floyd still won those fights pretty convincingly for the most part. But that first fight, Marcus Maidana came out. He used his strength. He used his size to push Floyd Mayweather back against the ropes. And then used all that to try to just, throw those flurries of punches, try to connect with something, try to make life miserable for Floyd Mayweather in that Philly shell defense. And it kind of worked. Again, it kind of worked. I think Logan Paul is going to try to do something similar in this fight. The difference is Logan Paul is not Marcos Maidana. He's not an elite level fighter. He's not even as good as his brother is. So he's going to back him up. He's going to be throwing shots, and they're all going to be landing on the glove of Floyd Mayweather or missing an air. They're not going to. None of those are going to really score. Now, does he have a little bit of power? Is he the bigger fighter? So if he did connect with something, could something quote unquote happen? Hurt Floyd Mayweather? I guess so. But I honestly think that's also a notion here. I think that's a narrative that's getting overblown by a lot of even the people that are hyping this fight because they're trying to create the intrigue too, right? They want people to think there's some danger for Floyd here. But maybe this is some of the YouTubers coming out too that, and a lot of obviously diehard combat sports fans, boxing fans will know this. Sometimes the bigger guy like that, sometimes the stronger guy, does he have some strength? Yeah, it doesn't mean you punch hard though. It doesn't mean you're an elite power puncher. Just because Jake Paul, I'm already making mistakes here with both brothers. Just because Logan Paul is the bigger fighter, a stronger fighter here than Floyd, that doesn't mean he's going to go out there and just Francis Ngannou melt him, starch him. That's not gonna happen. He's not gonna be able to do that. He's gonna go punch himself out. Rounds 1, 2, maybe 3. He's gonna be punching himself out. Gonna start to get tired. Floyd will send that Philly shell. I think he'll counter here and there. I think he could knock him out with one of those counter punches, actually. I think he could actually flatline him pretty bad with one of those counter punches, rounds 1 through 3. Or I think even if he doesn't do that, I think he'll absorb all those shots, not eat anything big, not eat anything maybe at all even. And then I think later on, rounds 3, 4, 5, Floyd will start to take over. I think he'll toy with him a little bit. I think he'll give the fans their money worth. I think he'll, land some jabs, land some big shots, land some body shots. And then I think round 5, around there, I think he puts the foot on the gas, and I think he knocks him out. I think he walks him down, and I think he pieces him up, similar to what he did against Conor McGregor in their fight. And what's more impressive, even going into this fight about Floyd, that we've now heard today at the media availability, is that Floyd said for the Conor McGregor fight, and some guys have floated this notion out there, but we've heard that Floyd didn't really train for that Conor McGregor fight or train as hard. He said he did something similar for Logan Paul here. I'm actually thinking, now, you're playing with fire when you're getting as old as Floyd is. When you start to do this a little bit. But he's so good, and he does take calculated risks. So could that be a mistake eventually? Yeah, I guess it could be. But he said he didn't really train as hard for this fight either. Now, hopefully he took it seriously enough that he can go out there and not get embarrassed. Now, as my guy Jason from Glove Talk said, yes, if Floyd gets knocked out, if he gets flatlined, something happens, it's going to be very meme-worthy. This is going to be a very memed moment if Floyd Mayweather gets knocked out. It'll be talked about everywhere if Floyd Mayweather gets knocked out. It'll make CNN. It'll make Fox News. It'll make MSNBC. It'll make everywhere if Floyd Mayweather gets knocked out. SportsCenter will probably break into whatever NBA game they're in or wherever they're doing. Tennis, I don't know what they're going to be showing Sunday night. They'll break into it, and they will talk about Floyd Mayweather being knocked out. That's how big of a moment that would be. It's not going to happen, though. I give it zero shot. Like I said, the biggest question of the week, does Logan Paul have any chance? I think zero. I think the odds makers right now, you're seeing some of the odds. Right now, Logan Paul is a better favorite. He's a little bit less of an underdog than Conor McGregor was. Conor McGregor, listen, he's not a pro boxer. He's gonna lose that fight, but Conor McGregor is still a real fighter, though. This is the sports books. This is Vegas trying to get people to bet Logan. They're trying to get people to bet on certain money lines. They're trying to get people to either go take on Logan Paul, or they're trying to get people to go bet on Floyd Mayweather. They're just trying to take money on this fight. They don't want that's what Vegas is trying to do. That's why I don't think it's actually. I think this line, I think it would actually be more, but I think Vegas doesn't want giving. They don't like giving away free money, right? So I think Vegas is trying to get some people to bet on Logan Paul. They're trying to get some people to bet here and there to try to get money in different places. I think that's what that is, honestly. He's got no shot. Floyd Mayweather should be the biggest favorite in the history of combat sports. Maybe that'll be the most notable quote I ever say on this show, that Floyd Mayweather should be the greatest favorite in the history of combat sports here. Now watch me get memed after he gets knocked out coming up on Monday on episode 93 of the Man in the Cage podcast. But you'll have to tune in for that and tune in for the fight coming up, of course, on Sunday night on Showtime pay-per-view as Floyd Mayweather does take on Logan Paul, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to come back here on Monday, and I think we're going to go, yeah, told you so. That's what happened. Logan Paul is going to go fight in MMA now. He's going to go fight Dylan Dennis or go fight another YouTuber or something like that. I think that's what's going to happen. But it'll be a spectacle. It'll be fun. Showtime's doing it, so we'll see if they do it right. We'll see if it's fun, because you have to keep making this a spectacle. If it's not, it's going to come off weird. They got to keep doing a good job of juggling the fun with the seriousness. Now, where you do balance that out too, where the fun and the serious, because you also have Chad Ochocinco, the former Bengals wide receiver, making his boxing debut on this card as well, fighting Brian Maxwell. Which, why they chose Brian Maxwell? Maybe they think Chad Ochocinco is going to just out athletic the guy every day of the week. But Brian Maxwell, although he has never won a professional boxing fight, whether it be an actual pro boxing or a bare knuckle boxing fight, Brian Maxwell's been in bare knuckle. He actually has a bout. I looked at this. He's got a bout coming up in bare knuckle boxing coming up later this summer, actually in June. So I think they're thinking Brian Maxwell's team's like, hey, we're not going to get beat up too bad here. We're going to go out there and take care of it. I don't know why they chose him for Chad Ochocinco, Chad Johnson. That'll be interesting to me, but whatever. So that's another little sideshow a little bit. Even though Brian Maxwell, again, he's been in the combat sports realm. He's been fighting here and there. Bare knuckle boxing, which is very serious, obviously. If you're in bare knuckle boxing, you're a bad you-know-what. Even if you're losing, you're a bad you-know-what. So I don't know why they chose that, but whatever. That's another little fun fight. Chad, you got the former NFL player there. But the rest of this card, though, there are some interesting spots, though, right? I mean, there are some fights the rest of this card where, you have Badou Jack now. He's now in action on this card. Badou Jack was supposed to fight Jean Pascal, but Pascal popped he popped hot on literally every single steroid on the planet, every single thing you can be taking as performance-enhancing drugs. Yeah, Jean Pascal, if you did not see that, he tested positive for all of them. And that was terrible by Jean Pascal. So he's out of that fight. But Badou Jack, he's still in action, taking on Dervin Colina now, 10-round light heavyweight bout. Badou Jack will take care of him easily. Big betting favorite should be, so he should take care of him easily there, Dervin Colina. But that's still, that's Badou Jack's a serious fighter, though. The next one after that, Hurd taking on Luis Arias. I think that one's also going to be, that's another serious boxing fight there. 10 rounds, junior middleweights. Hurd today was talking about possibly facing Charlo brother down the line here. So I think that's also another one that's going to give some credibility to this to this card. I've got Badou Jack winning that one. I've got Hurd winning the other one. Hurd, a very good fighter, a lot of good skills. So, and then you go down the list here. You can throw some here and there that I think this is where Showtime's actually doing a good job mixing it between serious boxing and the sideshow that it is. That you do have some serious fights, but then you have some of the sideshow fights on this card. And I just hope the telecast itself, obviously, coming up Sunday night, just keep making it that way. It's serious, but not serious. That's what they need to go with. And if they do that, I think this should be a fun card, and I don't think it hurts boxing at all. So there you go. Previewing Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul coming up Sunday night on Showtime pay-per-view. All right, that's all my preview today. That's all I've got for all of those previews. Still got a lot coming up, though, and I will keep this on the whole time. Now, you'll notice, obviously, I recorded my interview with John Stargaryen yesterday from the Club and Sub podcast about UFC Vegas 28. So you'll see I'm not wearing it in the interview, but I will be wearing this the rest of the show, including when I come out of the interview here to let all of you go. Talked about coming up on Monday what we have planned for episode 93 of the podcast, the Man in the Cage podcast. But I will wear this while I'm listening to John Stargaryen, which was a very interesting interview, actually. And John Stargaryen, we always have Luke Lampy on. I almost said Luke Campbell. I'm crossing boxing and MMA now. My guy Luke Lampy from Sparring with Reality Betting and the Club and Sub podcast on. We always have him on the show, always talking about the betting angles of things. Always does a great job. We're going to have Luke on again soon here. But I've always wanted to have some of the other co-hosts, some of the other guys as well on from the Club and Sub podcast over there. And John Stargaryen does a great job. He joined me. You're going to hear that in just a couple minutes here. His full breakdown of UFC Vegas 28, the full betting side of things, and go through some of these cards, some of these fights, break them all down one by one. So hope you enjoy the interview coming up. And again, I'll be on the backside of this to talk to everybody about episode 93 of the podcast. But until then, here's John Stargaryen joining me yesterday via Zoom talking about UFC Vegas 28. Excited to welcome onto the show right now someone who I've never had on, but I've always wanted to have on the show here. He is John Stargaryen from the Club and Sub podcast. You can check out John every Wednesday night on the podcast as part of a roundtable with other MMA bettors as they talk about all of the upcoming cards. So make sure you go check out John. He's one of the co-hosts on the show every Wednesday night. And of course, we always have Luke Lampy on. Luke always speaking glowingly of John. And that's why I wanted to have you on today, John, get your opinions for UFC Vegas 28. And as I bring you on here, I messaged you and just, peeling back the curtain a little bit for everybody out there. I messaged you earlier this week and I said, hey, would you want to jump on, talk with me about the card? And you said, absolutely. And you also said you had some strong opinions. So I'm very excited to talk to you today. I'm very excited to get some of these strong opinions out of you today. How's it going today, man? And how you feeling going into this UFC Vegas 28 card on Saturday?
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's going well. You guys can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox. Yeah, I'm excited for this card, to be honest with you. I've seen a lot of people saying it's not the best card to wager on. I don't think it's the best, but I don't think it's bad. I think there's a couple of really nice spots that are kind of being ignored or just seeing a lot of wrong takes. So we'll see.
I like it. And we're going to go through the main card here, and then we'll also go through some of the prelims, and we'll get all of your opinions because you guys do some great stuff on the Club and Sub podcast. So we'll get all of your opinions for UFC Vegas 28 right here. And we'll start out with the main event, John. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Augusto Sakai in the heavyweight division should be a fun one. And if you go by MMA math, which MMA math always works, right? MMA math is, we should just go by MMA math all the time. But MMA math would tell you that this should be an interesting fight, that Augusto Sakai, right? He has faced Alistair Overeem. So has Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik in his matchup with Overeem, he was losing most of the fight and then knocks out Overeem late in the fight. And then the opposite side, Sakai was beating Overeem most of the fight and then gets stopped late in his fight versus Overeem. So MMA math tells you here that this should be an interesting matchup. Both these guys, too, of course, only 2 losses in their career. How do you see this matchup playing out? And do you have any betting tips for this main event fight? Is there anything you're looking to play in this main event, a heavyweight clash between Rozenstruik and Sakai?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, the Overeem Rosenstrike fight, just thinking about it makes me sick to my stomach. I had a pretty big bet on Overeem myself. Was not fun. In terms of this fight, I do have a bet. I actually bet Sakai about 1.5 units at plus 115. I actually think even playing him around evens isn't bad. To me, when I look at it, my question really is do you think Rosenstrike can win a decision? Because when I look at the fight, like, I don't really see how that happens. He's woefully low volume. He's not a guy who's low volume because he's suppressing volume. Like, we saw in the Cyril Gane fight, he basically just kind of let Gane dictate the pace. Same thing in the Overeem fight, was content to lose a low volume kickboxing match. And so, Sakai, on the other hand, is very, very aggressive. He's going to go forward. He's going to throw a lot. For heavyweight, his output is tremendous. And so it's like, I look at the fight, and if it goes 5, I don't really see many scenarios that Rosenstrike wins the decision unless it's predicated on him hurting Sakai 2 or 3 times, which, again, I don't think is super likely. And so it comes down to, how often do you think Rosenstrike can KO Sakai? And to me, he can do it. Sakai is hittable, but so far he seemed pretty durable. And like I said, it's not like Rosenstrike's kind of developed this reputation as a counter striker, but he's not really that. I actually saw an interesting video today that was kind of like mocking Rosenstrike's counter strike and calling him more of just like a weight striker. He just kind of lets his opponents do whatever. And that's kind of the truth. And so, yeah, I think he could knock Sakai out. Do I think that's a 40% outcome? Not particularly. Yeah. And I honestly, I've seen some people who take some takes on the over here, and I don't hate that. A couple of the guys on Club and Sub are on the over. I think my concern is I actually kind of think Rosenstrike's durability is a bit overrated. He hasn't faced many guys, even Gane, who were going to really come for him, whereas Sakai's going to go forward, and, he throws with a lot of intent. And so, yeah, I like Sakai a good bit. I kind of just think unless he gets knocked out, it's very hard for him to lose this fight. And like I said, it could happen, but I don't enough to make Rosenstrike the favorite. I really don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. And, Rosenstrike's one of those fighters where I think in a lot of his fights, and we've already seen that a little bit, even the Overeem fight, that Rosenstrike's going to be losing a lot of fights until he isn't anymore. That's just how he's going to win fights. So the knockout's always going to be there. He is a heavyweight, of course. We did see Sakai in the Overeem fight. I don't want to say gas out or melt down, but, you saw him slow down and then eventually get worn out in those final rounds against Overeem, gets grinded out. But for the most part, we've seen Sakai be, pretty tough. We've seen him have a good career here so far. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things where if Rosenstrike doesn't knock him out, Sakai is probably, as you said, going to keep moving forward on him and keep, putting that volume together, stay in his face, maybe put him away even, as you said. So I do think Sakai is, if you're going to put your money on somebody in this fight, I think that's the money line. I think that's the fighter you want to put it on. You mentioned a little bit there, and I'll get to the co-main event in a second, and we'll move down the rest of the card. But you mentioned the over there. Will there be any round props? Would that be one that you would look at? Maybe the under in this fight, or any that you'd be targeting possibly?
So, like, I actually think if you were gonna bet a round prop, playing over 1.5 is the way to go. The problem for me is, again, it's a heavyweight fight, and these over 1.5s always seem pretty appetizing because who doesn't want to play an over 1.5? But like I said, Sakai throws with a lot of intent. He's going to work the body. I'm not sure how durable Rosenstrike really is. He has a reputation for being durable, but he hasn't really fought any big hitters other than, JDS at the tail end of his career. And so, like I said, I really wouldn't be shocked if Sakai can get into range and starts working the body if he puts him out. So it's not something I'm really interested in. One other thing, too, just to touch on real quick with regards to Sakai play, I should have touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
Rosenstrike, I'm not saying he doesn't have power. He does, but he's kind of gotten the reputation of being like an A-level hitter, like someone like a Francis. I just don't think there's a lot of evidence to support it. You look at the guys he knocked out, Junior Albini, not in the UFC. Alan Crowder, never really a UFC caliber fighter. Andre Arlovski, not super chinny, but a guy who's been knocked out a fair amount of times in his career. JDS, at the point in his career that he knocked him out, was a guy who's getting hurt in every fight. And then Overeem, obviously the classic, Mr. Chinny's been KO'd 18 times in his career. And so, again, I'm not saying he doesn't have power, but I think the idea that he's got like this touch of death, I think is very, very overstated.
I agree with you there that, he does have some power, but I don't think, it's one of those things where the proof, the proof is in the pudding a little bit. Yeah. And you see it sometimes, but the Overeem fight, that's a great example there. That Overeem, he gets hurt by everybody. Even the Walt Harris fight, he survives it. And then he's able to then, as Walt Harris is gassed out at that point after all those flurries of punches he threw, then take over the fight. So yeah, Rosenstrike's got some power, but I wouldn't go as far as, and it's the heavyweight division. So power is, everybody's got some sort of power in the heavyweight division. Otherwise, you're probably not at this level being into the UFC if you don't have some sort of power. But is it elite power? Not necessarily. It's not a Ngannou power for sure. Does Jairzinho Rozenstruik have? So that should be an interesting matchup between Rozenstruik and Augusto Sakai. Co-main event. John, we have another heavyweight fight. We have Walt Harris meeting Marcin Tybura. Any plays here? And I'll ask you this, and this is just my initial thoughts going into this fight this weekend, that I think that if Marcin Tybura doesn't get a takedown right away in the first round, he could be in a little bit of trouble for 5 minutes. Now, after the 5 minutes, I think Tybura's chances of being able to use his kickboxing, some of those things go up a little bit, as Walt Harris, an athlete, a good fighter, but we've seen him gas out a little bit. Do you agree with that? And again, do you have any plays? How do you see this one playing out between Walt Harris and Marcin Tybura?
Yeah, so no bet as of yet. And like Tybura has been, for me, a really strong money train for me. I think I bet him in all of his last 3 fights. I also bet him live, like plus 400 after round 1 against Hardy in his last fight. But yeah, I think you nailed it. Like something that's interesting that Danny Lags, who's one of my co-hosts in the Club and Sub podcast, actually just messaged me right before we jumped on, is the under 2.5 there's minus 120, which I do think is interesting. Kind of to your point, Harris hits, he's very low volume, so he's not a guy I particularly like to rely on much, but he does hit very hard. And Tybura, for as much as I've liked to back him and he's a complete fighter, he's pretty much defensively void on the feet. It's something that's kind of, gone, people have sort of forgotten about after, this little streak that he's been on. But if you go back to the Hardy fight, Hardy just doesn't have a lot of power, but he was teeing off on him in the first round there. Rothwell, the fight before that, was teeing off on him in the first round there before he gassed out. Tybura is very hittable, and Harris hits very hard. And before this run, everybody was calling Tybura chinny. I think people throw the term chinny around too much, but in heavyweight MMA, when you're as defensively void as Tybura is, you're going to get knocked out a lot. And so, yeah, I sort of think in the early portion of this fight, I don't want to say in trouble, but he's going to be in a constant danger of getting knocked out. And in terms of the other way, like, I don't really think, again, kind of similar to the main event, I don't really think Harris can win minutes. I don't think he has really any ability to do so. He's very low volume. He can't really grapple at all, especially if he gets grounded. He's very, very knockout reliant. Something that's interesting for anybody that has it, I know FanDuel Sportsbook was offering plus 650 for Harris round 1 KO. And I think that's interesting, and I'm considering, because I do think that's a significant portion of his win equity as a first round knockout. And like I said, I think that I'm thinking about playing that, because I do sort of think if Tybura doesn't ground Harris, there's a pretty good chance he's going to get knocked out. And if he does, Harris doesn't have a bottom game and Tybura's got a pretty good top game. So, yeah, I'd be pretty surprised to see this go the distance. So I think the under is kind of a nice spot there.
I think it is too. And that's why it's crazy. You never want to tell a fighter, right, that, your strategy should be just go put it all in the first round, lay it all on the line, and that's the fight for you. But for Walt Harris, I actually think that is a little bit here, that I do think he's going to have to knock him out in round 1 in order to win this fight. Questionable gas tank, not a lot of output. You said there with the grappling, his wrestling, questionable there. So if this fight gets deeper, Tybura is going to be able to clinch more. He's going to be able to grind him out, grind the gas tank down, get him to the ground, maybe get the finish, get a sub somewhere in there will be Tybura, and use that kickboxing a little bit better in the later rounds. So for Walt Harris, I think it is come out, try to launch those big bombs, try to knock out Tybura, who very defensively inefficient. He will get chin checked in this one, and I think it could be a long 5 minutes for him that he's going to have to survive if he wants to win this one against Walt Harris, or again, just immediately try to find a way to clinch or get him to the ground. So I agree with you on this one between Walt Harris and Marcin Tybura. Next up on this main card, we have Roman Dolidze taking on Laureano Staropoli. Middleweight division, Dolidze here, he is going to have a little bit of a reach advantage versus Staropoli. And this one actually not a short notice fight, but Staropoli being replaced, I believe, in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks here, win this fight with Roman Dolidze stepping in for another opponent so that Dolidze can make this bout at UFC Vegas 28. John, how do you see this one playing out? Dolidze, we've seen him in his 8-1 career so far, have some really promising moments, but then there's been some moments too where you scratch your head a little bit. That, I mean, I have flashbacks to Dolidze in his, I believe it was the last fight out, when he was going for his grappling wrestling and he kept getting reversed or swept from being on top. So Dolidze, the interesting one coming up here against Staropoli. How do you see this one playing out? And do you have any bets on this one?
Yeah, I took a unit on Staropoli at plus 142, I think. I don't know that I'd advocate a bet. If you get better than plus 125, I don't think it's a bad shot to take. I think less than that, I probably wouldn't touch it. For me, it's weird because I've been very eager to fade Dolidze throughout his UFC career. I did fade him against Trevin Giles, and Trevin Giles had my gut in my throat for the entirety of that fight. The reason I took Staropoli, I think there's look, I have some concerns that he could get grabbed and held up against the cage here. We've seen that happen against other guys. He's coming up to middleweight from welterweight, and Dolidze is obviously down from 205. Those are big concerns, and I do think Dolidze can ground him. But Staropoli, if you actually watch him, he doesn't really accept bottom position ever. Now, he will give his back to get up, but I really couldn't find any evidence of Dolidze being a guy who was going to put hooks in or put in a body triangle to stop that. And so I do expect that he'll be able to work up. He was able to against Tim Means, who actually can put hooks in and couldn't get them in. And so I think Staropoli can get up. On the feet, I think it's interesting. Like, Dolidze can compete with him early there, but he doesn't have much of a gas tank at all. And Staropoli, what he is reliable to do is push a heavy pace. And so it's one of those things where I kind of think, if you don't want to play anything before the fight and kind of wait to live bet Staropoli after the first, I think that's not a bad idea. To be honest, I'm kind of having some buyer's remorse for not doing that myself. But I do think the later this fight goes, you're going to see kind of a tipping point around the 7-8 minute mark where Staropoli starts to take over, provided he doesn't get finished early. I don't think Dolidze's jiu-jitsu is anything special, but I don't know whether Staropoli can deal with leg locks. I'm assuming he can. Most guys at the UFC level should be able to, but who knows? We saw Kelvin Gastelum was allegedly a black belt get heel hooked, not too long ago. So I don't really know, but I do think it's kind of dog or pass. There's too many question marks about Dolidze. He has no defense. He has no gas tank, and his preferred method of submission grappling just isn't very effective for kind of the MMA meta of grappling.
Yeah, I agree. And Dolidze is one of those guys where you see some of the promising things, but then you see a lot of things that I think eventually are going to get him in a bit of trouble. And I agree that this could be the spot. Now, if this isn't the spot, I do think it'll happen down the line. So dog or pass absolutely on this fight, as Dolidze hasn't done enough. And I believe, most sports books have him around minus 150 right now. He's getting a little chalky even there, and we'll see where the money goes and see if that comes down or goes up. But yeah, I think you got to pass maybe this one or go for Staropoli, as Dolidze just has too many question marks going into this fight against Laureano Staropoli. Next one up, welterweight division. I'm excited to ask you about this one, John. Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Miguel Baeza. Ponzinibio last time out, he got stopped, he got knocked out, but he was also coming off of a lot of injuries, a lot of time off, was very rusty. I think we could see a very different Ponzinibio going into the octagon this Saturday. The other end, you got Miguel Baeza, who's a very hot up-and-coming prospect. He has faced some adversity before. The Matt Brown fight, he was in a little bit of trouble, came back, still won the fight. Interesting one, John, here. And you said you had a strong opinion, so I want to hear it, man. What's your strong opinion here on Ponzinibio versus Baeza? What's your play in this fight as well?
Yeah, so this is my biggest bet on the card. I have 3 units on Ponzinibio plus 115. I think playing him around plus 100 is fine. So let me just wind the clock back a bit here. I actually bet Li Jingliang against Ponzinibio in his last fight. Luke, one of my co-hosts, also bet Jingliang in that fight. And, it's kind of funny because at the time it seemed like MMA Twitter and the whole MMA gambling market was like, oh, this minus 300 line on Ponzinibio is justified, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't think this doesn't make any sense at all. Ponzinibio has always been pretty vulnerable to counters. Lee's a pretty powerful striker who's a pretty sharp counterboxer. Ponzinibio knocks him out, and suddenly the narrative has become Ponzinibio is washed. Clearly he looked horrible in that fight. And if you watch my podcast, you'll know that I'm a little less technical focused than Luke is. I prefer to look at the macro when evaluating fights rather than the micro. I don't spend too much time worrying about who's going to win with what technique. And I bring that up only to actually go to the micro here. I hear a lot of people talking about how bad he looked against Lee, but if you actually watch that fight, what you saw basically, I do think he had some issues with timing early, but if you actually watch closely, he was pressuring as he normally does. The problem was every time he'd get near the pocket, you saw Lee kind of trying to counter with a 1-2 hard at him and him backing back out. And that they kind of played that dance for 3 minutes. Eventually, he finally started getting off on leg kicks and started to look good. But sure enough, the first time he actually crashed the pocket, he got caught, he got clipped right on the chin and put out. Now, maybe some people think that's looking bad, but I just think it was kind of a game of chess, and he ended up getting caught in that game of chess. You can say, oh, his durability is cracked. People were saying Robert Whittaker's durability was cracked 2 years ago because he had all those injuries and was out forever. People like to say things, but the truth is a powerful welterweight who hits you right on the chin can put out anybody, and that's what happened. If you actually look at Ponzinibio's career, he's never had any chin issues. The idea that because, he had some injuries, now suddenly he's chinny, that doesn't really make much sense to me. And so you have Ponzinibio, who's fought a ton of real strikers, beat Nordine Taleb, beat Sean Strickland, beat Mike Perry. And now he's fighting Miguel Baeza, who, look, Baeza does some fun stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a potent offensive striker, but look at the guys he's fought in the UFC. First of all, he fought Victor Reina on Contenders, and he won that fight, but he won it via 2 knockdowns in a fight. He was outpaced pretty badly by a guy who was not UFC caliber. He fought Hector Alvana, not UFC caliber. Fought the corpse of Matt Brown, who nearly finished him in the first round. Again, Matt Brown's a legend, but I would not say Matt Brown is UFC caliber at this point. Then he fights Takashi Sato, and it turns out he has some offensive grappling, and he takes Sato down and finishes him there. Look, I was impressed by that. It actually gave me the stock of Baeza in my mind rose a bit with that fight. But Takashi Sato is probably not a top 40 fighter at 170 pounds. Now he's fighting a guy who was a consensus to everybody as far as 6 months back, top 6 fighter at welterweight, who now, because he had 4 bad minutes and got knocked out, is apparently washed, and which makes no sense to me. Like, you have a guy who's been fighting and beating killers for years against the guy who's beaten nobody in the top 40, really, and the guy who's beaten nobody in the top 40 is a favorite. That makes no sense. On top of that, from a more technical, assessing this fight more technically, the guys who have given Ponzinibio issues typically have been counter strikers, guys who had sharp counters and could hit him on the way in. Baeza doesn't really have that at all, to be honest with you. And so Ponzinibio is going to go forward. I assume he's going to go forward, as he has in every fight in his career, and he didn't even in his last fight. And we've seen when guys have gone forward on Baeza, his defense breaks down. This isn't Matt Brown who's going to be hitting him. Ponzinibio hits a lot harder. His volume is reliable. And on top of that, I would say people keep talking about Baeza's ability to, affect him with leg kicks. But I think of the two, Ponzinibio is the better leg kicker, and he's the more likely one of the two to check leg kicks. And so to me, this just makes no sense. Maybe there is a chance that Ponzinibio is shot. I guess that's possible. But people are too quick to kind of throw that out there. Didn't see him getting wobbled every time he got touched by Lee. He got knocked out by a bomb. That's fine. And so my personal view is Ponzinibio should be like 60 to 65% here. I like Baeza as a prospect. This is an enormous step up in class, and the line to me seems crazy.
Yeah, this is a spot where it's a prime case of what have you done for me lately with the odds makers a little bit. And I disagree with it because I'm going to give Ponzinibio a little bit of a pass for that last fight. Again, a loss is a loss. You have to take it. But coming off of everything he had, he definitely looked rusty in there too. And you mentioned some of that there where he looked like he was doing the typical Ponzinibio thing where he was stalking his opponent, but then he seemed a little trigger shy. He seemed a little off on his timing. I think getting back in there, even if he did go only 4 minutes and get knocked out, I think that will be good for him in this fight, that I think he'll knock some of that rust off with those 4 minutes and then get in here versus Miguel Baeza. He's had more time to train still here, get ready for this fight. And I think he'll come in ready for it, ready to pull the trigger. And, Ponzinibio, it's not too long ago, and we're looking at what Neil Magny's doing now. I mean, Neil Magny, the cardio machine that he is, and what he's been able to do with his wrestling and some of his striking in his career, Ponzinibio stalked him, walked him down, and just broke him down. I mean, that's hard to break down Neil Magny the way Ponzinibio did in that fight, where he just essentially wore him down and just kept grinding at him with all those strikes, pushing him up against the cage. So yeah, Ponzinibio here, I'm a little surprised he's the underdog. I mean, the betting odds, again, they're not too astronomical for Miguel Baeza, but I am a little surprised still the veteran who is 28-4 in his career still is the small betting underdog or the betting underdog here. So I agree with you. I think this is one of those fights where we will truly see if Ponzinibio is, I mean, if it happens again, if he gets knocked out, something bad happens, we'll learn if Ponzinibio is truly washed, and we'll learn here what Miguel Baeza kind of is. This is the first kind of big step up opponent he's going to have in his UFC career here. So it should be a very, very fun one there between Ponzinibio and Miguel Baeza, John. Next one up.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
And to be clear, it's like, yeah, that could happen. I agree with you. If Baeza walks through him, obviously that's more telling. But I don't really I'm not even really worried if I lose the bet. This is the kind of spot, it's a classic recency bias spot in MMA betting. I'm going to make money betting the spot more often than not. Like, that's just kind of my view on it. If I lose, I lose. But yeah. I know more often than not, it's going to be profitable. So.
No, I agree. And this is a smart spot, I think, to take a dog play here, or take somebody at plus money, or that's a veteran who, is going to give Miguel Baeza his biggest test. I mean, Baeza in that Matt Brown fight, he was hurt at one point. I think some people have started to forget that a little bit, and that's Matt Brown. Matt Brown's totally gone now. I mean, Matt Brown should be fighting in Bellator or retired or doing grappling tournaments or something. I mean, that's what Matt Brown should be doing right now, and he was able to hurt Miguel Baeza. Next one up on this UFC Vegas 28 card, John, Dusko Todorovic taking on Gregory Rodrigues in the middleweight division. This one intrigues me because Rodrigues he's having a great month here. He gets a win, an upset win, by the way, on the last LFA card. And now he gets a spot here against Todorovic on a UFC main card. He's stepping in here to face Todorovic. Do you think Rodrigues has another shot here to pull another upset this month and continue the great run he's on? Or do you think Todorovic is going to maybe send him back to the LFA here, or at least rain on the party a little bit?
So I don't have a bet yet, but it's getting to the point where I almost feel like I have to make a bet. 2 weeks ago, Gregory Rodrigues was plus 200 against Josh Fremd, who is never sniffing or should not ever be sniffing the UFC. And now he's plus 125 against Dusko Todorovic. That doesn't really pass the smell test for me, to be honest. And when you look at it, I bet Todorovic fairly big against Soriano in his last fight. And look, we all knew, I think everybody who kind of analyzed that fight knew that Soriano had a real chance to knock him out early in that fight. You know, Todorovic has some bad defensive tendencies, but it's almost as if the bad defensive tendencies now have kind of eclipsed everything else he does well. You know, he's a very strong offensive boxer. He's a good grappler. He hits pretty hard. He has good cardio. He keeps an eye out, high output. He's good in the clinch. And we're just kind of forgetting about that. And because Rodrigues hits hard, now suddenly it's anybody that hits hard is going to beat Dusko Todorovic, except he beat Michel Pereira right before he joined the UFC, who hits pretty hard. You know, I think this makes no sense. I'm still quite bullish on Todorovic as a prospect, to be honest. Yes, the defensive issues, he's going to continue to get knocked out here and there if he doesn't clean them up. But he's 26 years old. And, you know, that's kind of, I don't like saying, you know, people have to pay their dues and whatnot and stuff like that. But the truth is sometimes it takes a guy getting knocked out to understand what they're doing can't work long term. Now, I'm not saying he'll make those adjustments here, but I just don't really rate Gregory Rodrigues at all. You know, I bet Jordan Williams against him on Contender Series. And, you know, people talk about Todorovic's defense. Rodrigues has no defense at all. He's a lot slower. He seems pretty fragile. He's been knocked out regionally before too. You know, his volume's not very reliable. You know, he's a good grappler, but I don't think he has the gas tank to really do it for 3 rounds. And I don't think, first of all, even if he can take Todorovic down, I doubt he can control him there. But I know he can't keep up with him gas-wise. And so it's another case of Rodrigues probably needs to knock him out in the first round to win this fight. And, you know, Puna Soriano, I still have my questions about him, but he is an explosive athlete who is very fast and hits like a truck. I get Rodrigues hits hard, but he's not nearly as explosive as Soriano is, in my opinion. And he's more hittable than Soriano is. So to me, like, I'm looking at it, it feels like recency bias. I wasn't looking to target a play on Todorovic in this fight, but it's getting to the point now, you know, that keeps coming down, like that minus 125 range. I'm going to have to, just because I don't think the line makes any sense, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and this is one of those spots, again, where, you know, Rodrigues is riding a lot of momentum. And you talked about the Josh Fremd fight in LFA. And in my opinion, I think Josh Fremd, the style that he has, I don't think long-term he's going to be a contender, but I think the style that he has is so exciting because he does go for a lot of finishes. I actually think had he went out there, and this was set up for him against Rodrigues, that he was going to, they were trying to set it up a finish for him, so maybe he could get a UFC shot here, because we know Dana White loves these exciting guys that love to go out there and try to finish fights, you know? So I do think Rodrigues here, this is an interesting spot that he's riding a lot of momentum. But again, here, I think he's in a spot where this is, I don't say they're setting up a win for Todorovic, but I think they're setting up a fun fight here where there's going to be some action and maybe a win for Dusko Todorovic. And I agree with you on that one, that I do think Todorovic will probably get the win in this one over Gregory Rodrigues. And I don't rate him very high. I thought Josh Fremd, I thought he was going to stop him. I thought that was going to be the fight that maybe catapulted him into at least more LFA top-notch fights where he was close to a UFC shot or a top promotion or something like that. And I think Gregory Rodrigues here getting set up for another loss here against Dusko Todorovic in that one. John, one more here on the main card, and then we'll move through the rest of the card because I know you have some strong thoughts on another one on the prelims. But middleweight division, Tom Breese taking on Antonio Arroyo. This one, very interesting because you have Tom Breese, who's been up and down in his UFC career. Antonio Arroyo, he's coming in off of 2 straight losses. I don't want to say a loser leaves town, loser leaves the UFC fight necessarily, but it's close to that here. Who do you see winning this one between Tom Breese and Antonio Arroyo, and do you have any plays on this one?
Well, first of all, losers should leave town.
I'm glad you said it.
But I mean, I have no bet here myself. I do sort of think Breeze, even at like that minus 230 to 250 mark, is probably value personally. It's just very, very hard for me at this point to bet Breeze, period. You know, I bet him against Akhmedov and I bet him against Allen, and he collapsed in both of those fights and lost. Now, with that said, Arroyo is very low volume, and he's not the kind of guy who's going to bite the mouthpiece and really swarm you, the kind of guy that I think could cause Breeze to collapse. And so I don't expect that to happen here. And, you know, I think in terms of skill for skill, I think Breeze is significantly better, as he is in most of his fights these days. So I think Breeze has every tool to make this look pretty easy. I think he's probably going to make it look pretty easy. But, I mean, minus 250 is a big number, and Tom Breeze is not, like I said, at this point, he's so unreliable. I just can't put money. I can't put money on him. I have a suspicion that he's going to look hindsight value. I think he's probably better wherever the fight goes. I think he's certainly the better boxer, and I don't think Arroyo Jiu-Jitsu is anything really special. And look, Breeze obviously is a better gas tank, but yeah, I can't trust him. I don't even have, you know, I've seen people talk about the under here, but I don't really even have that much interest in an under because, you know, Breeze, his volume's good, but he's not the kind of guy that has a killer instinct that's really going to go for the kill when he has someone hurt and like unload. And Arroyo has no volume at all. And so I think the chances of this just kind of being a 15-minute staring match where Breeze, you know, just kind of cruises is very in play. To be honest, I think that's the most likely scenario. So yeah, I mean, I think Breeze is the side, but I wouldn't go anywhere near it.
Yeah, this is, well, you know, the issues in the past, and not trying to make fun of it, but, you know, the issues Breeze has had in the past with anxiety and all the things he's had outside the octagon. Yeah, this is one of those fights where, we'll see. I mean, Tom Breeze could make this look easy, or maybe he shows up and, you know, finds a way to lose this fight against Antonio Arroyo here, who, you know, he's coming off 2 straight losses. Is he great? No, but he's also probably in a fight where he's definitely going to get cut if he loses. So maybe he comes out with an extra gear. Yeah, this is a little bit of a stay away spot, especially at minus 240 where Tom Breeze is sitting at around right now. Could look really good, or it could look bad depending on how that one goes. But that is the UFC Vegas 28 main card, John. Let's move to the prelims here a little bit, and we'll go through these a little quicker. I'll just throw like 2 or 3 at you at a time here. Just tell me your quick thoughts, and then if you have any plays, or if you have any strong thoughts, you can go a little deeper into them. But we have Montana De La Rosa taking on Arian Arlovski, Tanner Bozier taking on Ilir Latifi, Francisco Trinaldo, Muslim Selekov. Any plays on these and your thoughts on all 3 of those?
Yeah, I mean, I did play Trinaldo at plus 188. I might play him again at plus 240. Just briefly, I don't see how this makes sense. You know, Selekov has no volume at all. He can't really grapple. We just saw him, I don't want to call it a robbery, but win a fight against Lasky Dos Santos. He probably shouldn't have won. I'm a bit concerned at the line that somebody knows something I don't, because it's quite confusing to me why it is where it is. But ultimately, I just think it's pretty much going to be an even low volume kickboxing match on the feet. And Trinaldo has massive upside grappling wise. So like I said, it makes no sense to me. It's concerning to me that the line is where it is. So
yeah. No, I agree there. And Trinaldo, the veteran there, I think that should be an interesting fight in that one. So those are 3 prelims that will end the prelim part of UFC Vegas 28. We'll keep moving down here, and I'll go 2 because the next one after that is one I know you have a strong opinion on. But the next 2 here, Wakwan Amir Kahani taking on Camilo Kirk, Alan Patrick taking on Mason Jones. Any strong opinions there? Any plays in those 2 fights?
I think Amir Khani does whatever he wants to Kirk, but again, he's a big gasser and grappling heavy fight. No real interest. The Jones fight's interesting. You know, I know some people that have plays on Jones. I don't hate it, but you know, UK wrestlers facing wrestlers in the UFC, that always makes me concerned. I'd like to see how Jones holds up against Patrick's wrestling before I take a shot at him. But I wouldn't take a shot at Patrick, because if he can't just control him on the mat, he's going to get dunked on. So I think Jones is going to win the fight, but I think there's enough grappling concerns. I don't really want a part of it.
Yeah, and Mason Jones is still young in his career, so he showed so much promise in Cage Warriors that the UFC probably obviously wants him to get a win here, especially coming off of a tough fight like he did, a very good fight. This may be a spot for him, but he's still learning though, so he could get tripped up here and there early in his UFC career here, but should be interesting to see Mason Jones step back in there. Final 2 fights of this one of this UFC Vegas 28 card prelims, John, and then I'll get to just a few other questions for you real quick, just favorite plays of the card, stuff like that. But Sean Woodson, Yusuf Salal, then Claudio Pulilis taking on Jordan Levitt. Have any plays on those and any strong thoughts on either of those cards, that fights that will start the card on UFC Vegas 28?
So I have no play on Zalal, but I've kind of been thinking about making a play on Zalal. I think there's a lot of questions about Woodson's game. In particular, his takedown defense. He has that kind of Montel Jackson narrow base thing where I kind of feel the feeling anybody that goes for a double leg on the fence is going to be able to clasp their hands really easily and put him down. Now, I don't really trust Zalal's wrestling or his jiu-jitsu, which is why I haven't played him, but I'm thinking about it. I just think Woodson's still being overrated for beating Kyle Bochniak, to be honest. And I think in terms of plays that I think are interesting, FanDuel again has plus 1,000 on a Yusuf Zalal sub, which I think is pretty interesting here because I think it is a decent portion of his win condition. In terms of Puelas leave it, I actually did take a small play on Puelas at plus 185. It's not very confident, but I don't personally view Leave It as a UFC caliber talent. His striking is certainly not UFC caliber. He's an okay wrestler, but in terms of his grappling, he's very submission before position. Just not stuff I'm looking for. I just really don't think he's going to last very long when he starts fighting guys who he can't just ragdoll. In terms of Puelas, look, I don't think Puelas is very good at all, but he wasn't last time we saw him. He's 24 years old, though. He's been away for 2 years. He's very young, still developing, trains at a good gym. He's been training for a while. I think he's got a clear edge on the feet, and his bread and butter is really grappling. Is it better than Levitt's? I'm not sure. A good chance it's not. But like I said, Levitt's submission over position tendency means he's going to provide Puelas chances to kind of take dominant positions. And with that being the case, I do think Levitt could, if he so chooses, just out grapple him and control him, but that hasn't been his tendency in the past. And if he provides the openings for Puelas to take top position, I think he can take it and hold him there. And so plus 185 seems wide to me. I think it should be closer to evens, maybe slightly in Levitt.
Yeah, I agree there. And there should be a couple of interesting fights to open up UFC Vegas 28 and many interesting fights. And I actually think this card, and I'll be honest, about a week or so ago when we had a lot of these fights dropping off, or we had a lot of opponents dropping off and they were looking to fill a lot of spots here, I was a little skeptical that this card would be anything that was reason or exciting to watch, would be anything that would be appealing to any MMA fans. It might be just one of those cards they use to get into the next pay-per-view, UFC 263, coming up the Saturday after. So I'm really surprised actually that going through this card, there are some fun fights here. There are some competitive fights. There are some really good fights on this UFC Vegas 28 main card and prelim. So it should be a fun night of fights coming up Saturday night with that one. And John, just a few more for you, then I'll get you out of here, man. Again, I appreciate you jumping on with me. First, I'll start with what is your favorite play? And I think I might already know this, but what's your favorite play of UFC Vegas 28 if you had to pick any bet that you have placed right now or you're going to place at some point?
Yeah, it's the Ponzinibio money line. Not even a question about it. I'm getting a top 8 guy as an underdog to a kid who's never fought anybody in the top 40. That's definitely my favorite play.
Yeah, and that's what I figured that was going to be your favorite play against Baeza, since you had such a strong opinion on it. But I thought I would throw that one at you. I agree there, and of course, those are your most confident plays. You went into this interview saying that, so those are your favorite plays right there. Do you have any favorite round props or any those types of plays? Would there be one fight that you would really look to play that you would say, hey, you know what, outside of money lines, this might be my favorite play of the card as far as round props or any of those types of things go?
Yeah, I think the two that I'm looking at are, if you were going to take, if you can get Harris KO better than plus 550, or Harris KO 1, I should say, better than plus 550, and then Zalal sub plus 1,000, that's crazy. I mean, I think those two are both, you're getting a good 5, 10, maybe even 15% on the Zalal one in terms of value on those spots. So those are both things I target.
Those are your favorite plays there as far as money lines, all the props, all that stuff goes. What would go to the other end of things now? What would be fights that you would definitely, is there a specific fight? Is there any fighters you would definitely stay away from on UFC Vegas 28 that you're already going into saying, I'm definitely not playing that, or even thinking about betting that fight?
We didn't even touch on it, but I think one that I'm seeing, kind of a lot of love on the dog side. And if you follow me, you know that I'm mostly a dog player, but Latifi Bozer is something that I have no interest in. I've seen a lot of love for Latifi. I guess my point is I wouldn't play Bozer because I've seen the guy held down before against the guy who can wrestle. So why wouldn't I play Latifi? Well, Latifi doesn't do anything on top. He doesn't throw strikes. He's easy to get stand-ups against. And so my view is, unless he knocks Bozer out, which could happen, but he's so small, I don't think it's very likely. I think his margins on rounds are very, very thin, and I think the line's right. So that one, and then, Amir Khan Kirk. Like I said, I think Amir Khan is going to do whatever he wants to Kirk, but both guys have gas tank issues, and if this turns into first 7 minutes of grappling and scrambling, that's just going to turn into a high variance mess. I do think Amir Khan gets him out of there, but again, not a fight I want my money near in any way, shape, or form.
I agree there. Those are just those are going to be some interesting fights to say the least on UFC Vegas 28. One more for you here. And I always ask my guy Luke Lampy this, our guy Luke Lampy from the Club and Sub podcast as well, John, but live betting angles on this card. Is there any specific fights or any specific fighters, again, that you would be looking to live bet? And it's one of my favorite questions because obviously you can get some value and maybe even go into a fight not having any skin on it, but then still leave with something. So do you have any live betting angles thoughts on this UFC Vegas 28 card?
Yeah, I have a couple of spots. First of all, I think, even though I have a bet on Sakai, I think, you're going to be able to tell fairly early in that fight whether or not Rosenstrike's affecting him with his strikes, and whether or not he's just getting off strikes while Sakai pressures him. I think it's one of those things. If 4 minutes in, it's pretty clear Sakai can just tank the damage. And you could probably still get a decent line at that point to jump in there. I touched on it before, but let's leave it. I think that's pretty interesting insofar as, like I said, Leavitt's got the ability to probably hold him down. But if it turns out a couple minutes into that fight and you have in-round betting that Leavitt can't hold him down and just control him there, I would jump on that right away. And then I think the obvious one that everybody, is probably talking about is Staropoli and Dolidze. I think you're going to notice, like I said, you notice it in every fight with Roman, but once you start to see that gas tank wane a little bit, there's a decent chance he's going to win the first round, and you're going to get a decent odds on him live after the first round. I'm not even sure if you have in-round betting. I touch it then. Just wait to see, when Staropoli starts freeing himself from the fence and stuff a bit more. But yeah, I think that's a prime one.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, and this was a higher level fight just a little bit, but the Edmund Shabazi and Jack Hermanson fight where you went into the fight knowing that if Shabazian doesn't melt him, doesn't get him out of there in the first round, you're probably going to get a good line because Shabazian is going to be the favorite at that point because you figured he'd be getting all of his striking off in the first round. But if Hermanson's still there, maybe rounds 2 and 3, you can start to look to live bet him on a good price because we know that Shabazian in his career now, if he gets out of the first round, with him, you have a good shot to maybe win the fight at that point. And same thing here with Staropoli and Dolidze. Should be a fun card, John, UFC Vegas 28.
Sorry, one other thing with regards to live betting. It's just something that I like to touch on because I kind of think most people approach live betting like, oh, I want a big plus number on someone against someone I know who will gas. Look deeper than that because you're going to find times throughout a card if you're watching every fight where you'll get someone. Look, no one wants to play minus 300, but you'll get someone who in your mind's clearly up 2-0 going into the third round at minus 300. Like that's basically stealing money at that point. Yeah. I can think of the last pay-per-view. I thought there was a reasonable chance Katlyn Chookagian was either 1-1 or 2-0 going into round 3, and she was minus 117 against a clearly gassed opponent. Don't just limit yourselves to certain fights where the dynamic is obvious. There's always going to be an edge there in those spots.
I agree. Absolutely. He is John Stargaryen from the Club and Sub podcast. Check John out every Wednesday night on the podcast as part of a roundtable with other MMA bettors as they talk about the upcoming cards. Make sure you go check out John as he co-hosts that show every Wednesday night. Are you guys doing a show tonight, John?
Yeah, 10 p.m. Eastern tonight.
Okay, sounds good. And again, that's the Club and Sub podcast. I believe it's on Twitter at Club and Sub, right? Is that the Twitter handle, I believe, at Club and Sub?
Twitter handle is at Club and Sub. The YouTube channel is the Club and Sub podcast.
So go check it out. That's coming up tonight. John Stargaryen will be on that, and you can go check out John on Twitter. Follow him at MMA Files. John, it's been fun, man. It's been a lot of fun going over all of these fights. Should be a fun night coming up on UFC Vegas 28. Enjoy the fights, man, and I'd love to have you on again soon sometime down the line. We'll talk about some more fights. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later, man.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
That was John Stargaryen from the Club and Sub podcast. Thanks to John for joining me. That was a lot of fun, a lot of great insight. Going to look to have John on in the future very soon here. One of those guys we're going to add to the stable of guests right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. And before I get us out of here, just a couple quick corrections there at the end. I said at Club and Sub as the Twitter handle. It's actually at Club and Sub pod. So go follow them on Twitter again, at Club and Sub pod. And then I threw myself off yesterday because normally I record my guests the day of. I record the rest of the podcast and I release it all that same day, or I at least start to export the video for you media guys out there, for you techie guys out there. But I actually recorded that yesterday on Wednesday. So I said the Club and Sub podcast was coming up tonight, which was Wednesday night, but of course now it is Thursday night or Friday whenever you're listening to this. So it will not be tonight, but it will be coming up next Wednesday again. Make sure you go follow them at Club and Sub. Go listen to the podcast coming up next Wednesday, the Club and Sub podcast. John Stargaryen does a great job over there. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. As you can tell, I flipped the hat around. I couldn't take it any longer of sitting with the flat-brimmed hat moving forward. I just couldn't take myself seriously, so I flipped it around for the end of the show here to get us out of here, get us into the weekend, and what's going to be a very, very good combat sports weekend. UFC Vegas 28 coming up Saturday night. Augusto Sakai, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, as we went through everything with John Stargaryen there, and in part one, my preview. Then coming up Sunday night, we have Floyd Mayweather taking on Logan Paul, the Mayweather-Paul card. Going to be a fun weekend of fights. The Logan Paul card with Floyd Mayweather's mostly sideshow, but it'll have its fun moments, some serious moments, and then we'll have the good old UFC Vegas 28 card, which is going to deliver some fun fights, some fun question marks coming off the weekend, and that's what we're going to do coming up on Monday, episode 93 of the Man in the Cage podcast. I'll be back here to break down everything from that Mayweather-Paul card, from UFC Vegas 28, what's next for a lot of these rankings, what's next for a lot of these fighters, what notable things happen, who didn't show up. Frankly, we'll go through all of that as we normally do in my 5-minute topics coming up on Monday on episode 93 of the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. You can go to the website, maninthecagemmma.show. As always, a lot of great stuff up there, including my sponsors. I'm going to mention them at the beginning of the show today. We have DBK Media, who's doing all my videos now, a lot of my content. So shout out to DBK Media, one of the sponsors of the show, as well as Bovada guys. Again, go sign up for Bovada right now. Doing a lot of great stuff over there. If you want to bet on any of the fights coming up this weekend, whether it be Mayweather-Paul or any of these other fights, especially UFC Vegas 28. Go check it out right now, guys. Bovada, and again, it's bovada.bit.ly/the Man in the Cage. That's the link for that one. That's Bovada, another sponsor on the show. So go check all of those out. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, there's a sponsor tab up there. You can email me, you can email my team here, and we will get you set up to be a sponsor on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. So go check that out on the website. A lot of other stuff there. You can go back to the beginning of the show, mentioned all of it, as well as you can go to all my Twitters again at Man in the Cage Pod. My Twitter's sounding old now already. I'm only turning 30 this week, and I'm already saying Twitters already. Twitter. If you go check out my Twitter at Man in the Cage Pod, on Instagram at Man in the Cage Pod, and then you can go to the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe there, as well as subscribing to all the audio platforms. Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, guys. Go hit the follow button. Go hit the subscribe button. That way you get the latest notifications for everything. All right, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Going to be a fun one coming up. Tweet at me. Follow along with all the fights. I'll be celebrating, as I said, my 30th birthday is coming up Saturday night. So I'll get to celebrate it with some fights. UFC Vegas 28. Get to celebrate it with some family. My wife, of course. So a lot of great things coming up. I'm excited for this weekend. I know you're going to be spending a lot of time with your family, whatever you got going on. Have a great weekend, guys. Have a great weekend. I'll meet you back here, right here on Monday, right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. All right, everybody, take care. I'll talk to you later.